Yeah. So what I wanted to say is that I think that Biden should revisit the idea of declaring a no-fly zone over Ukraine for two reasons. So one is obviously it would give him a way to go around the Republican obstruction in Congress for funding Ukraine. That's a big one. But two, I believe that if we had a no-fly zone over Ukraine, it would force America to cross swords with Russia, which would make it really tough for our pro-fascist, autocratic MAGA types to continue openly supporting Ukraine.
You mean openly supporting Putin?
Or, yes, openly supporting Putin. It'd almost be the same thing that FDR did, because we had a very pro-fascist movement back in FDR's day, and then once we got involved in World War II, it forced our pro-fascist movement to cross swords with Germany's pro-fascist movement.
Right, and they had to shut up and get quiet. But I don't think that starting World War III is the best way to shut up the right-wingers in America, that one, respectfully.
You know, we're getting to a point where we need to distract them with something, because if we don't stop them from looking inwardly at an enemy with them looking outwardly at an enemy, we could be in real trouble in this next election cycle. Yeah. And I know how draconian that sounds. I get it. Yeah. But these are desperate times.
Well, there is a long history of people, you know, I mean, the Roman Empire is probably the most famous collection of stories of leaders doing this, but Edward Gibbon's, I think, The Rise and Fall of the Third, the History of the Roman Empire, I forget the title. But, you know, that he talks about when things would go bad in the country, the emperor would figure, the Caesar would figure out, you know, some external war to have, come up with some new enemy and go off and conquer some new land. There's an argument made that the King of France was all gung-ho for the Crusades, you know, in the 1100s because of domestic problems. You know, and that was a way of getting the malcontents out of France and off to the Middle East. So, you know, I understand your logic.
I believe FDR did the same thing, in a sense.
I think events kind of did that for him. I mean, you know, I realize there are Republicans who think he provoked Pearl Harbor, but I'm skeptical. But,
yeah, I mean, Trump was always good at white rabbits, and in a sense, this would be one giant white rabbit. I mean, if America had to concentrate on an external enemy, I think we could maybe bury our pro-fascist movement for another 80 years.
Yeah, or it could be a black swan. I mean, you know, keep in mind Russia has as many nuclear weapons as we have for all practical purposes.
Right.
And right. Putin, if Putin's backed into a corner, or if he thinks he's on the verge of death and he's trying to leave some great legacy for himself or something like that, God only knows what could happen.
I don't disagree with you, but on the other hand, if he's allowed to swallow up Ukraine, God only knows what happens then.
That's a good point. Alan, thank you. We're not going to resolve this. But,
no, but food for thought.
Yeah, food indeed. Good conversation. Thank you very much. In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally.
Udori. This first chapter, or first essay, is from Charlotte Shane. It's called No Wave Feminism. If you feel like feminism is failing you, you're not alone. I sometimes have the impression that I'm as thoroughly feminist as I am thoroughly human. That feminism is as intrinsic to my contribution to my constitution as my skeleton is to my body. But in my 35 years, I've struggled with or outright rejected feminism on several occasions. First, as an ignorant adolescent, what do women need feminism for if they already got the vote? Then, as a sex worker who saw how regularly and even gleefully feminists stoked the public's long-standing antipathy toward professionally sexual women. And now, again, as someone moving even further into the far left, who cannot abide the forms of feminism that embrace and are complicit with the worst aspects of liberalism. The more I learn about the intersecting oppressive forces that continue to shape the Western world, colonialism, patriarchy, capitalism, xenophobia, and racism, and the network of cruel social machinery to which these systems give rise, incarceration, crippling debt, disenfranchisement, deportation, and so on, the less sense it makes to use gender as the primary lens through which to regard human-engineered suffering. Feminism doesn't feel like the sharpest weapon to wield against white supremacy or border policing, for instance, or even the best tool with which to approach basic civic concerns like vibrant schools. That's not because those issues don't impact women. Obviously, they directly and indirectly impact many. But they don't necessarily impact women more or in dramatically different ways than they do men. In other words, the most significant challenges these issues present aren't tethered to one's sex. And so prioritizing gender above other aspects of identity limits one's realm of ethical responses. Here's an example. American prisons often keep female prisoners shackled while they give birth. There are variations on the theme. Some women are shackled during labor, some are unshackled, but then shackled again almost immediately afterward. And almost all are shackled while heavily pregnant. There's some variation of what shackling entails, too. It can mean being cuffed at the wrists or at the ankles, or both, or cuffed to a hospital bed or chained at the waist. Articulating these details makes the sadism even starker. A class-action federal lawsuit in 2017 alleged more than 40 women at the Milwaukee County Jail suffered this horror. It was preceded by lawsuits in 2014 and 2016 against that same jail for similar practice. But the appalling practice is hardly confined to one city or one state. In 2015, New York prisons were found to be shackling prisoners in labor in spite of a state law that made it illegal to do so. And according to a 2016 report by the Prison Birth Project and Prisoners Legal Services of Massachusetts, jails and prisons in Massachusetts were guilty of similar violations. Most feminists probably agree that this is a feminist issue. The topic accordingly receives coverage on feminist websites and sometimes in women's magazines. But does a feminist obligation to attend to the rights of the imprisoned extend only as far as pregnancy and labor? Or is it a feminist issue when a non-pregnant woman is shackled? Or when she is caged for years and exploited for her labor, denied face-to-face visits from loved ones, held captive in a compound in the name of, quote, justice? If the answer to these questions is yes, then it is also a feminist issue. Then is it also a feminist issue when men are shackled during various health emergencies, seizures, say? In 2014, a male inmate in Colorado died after undergoing several seizures while in restraints and receiving no medical treatment. Is it a feminist issue when incarcerated men are denied the right to visit with family or exploited for their labor? Is it a feminist issue when so many men are raped while in prison? Or does feminism's responsibility begin and end with gender-based mistreatment? The feminists hired by prominent media outlets often advocate for measures that would result in higher levels of incarceration. They write op-eds in favor of further criminalization around sex work and call for longer prison sentences for men convicted of assault, which we've known for decades is not necessarily synonymous with men who committed the crime. They also disturbingly relish the theater of sentencing, like that enacted by Judge Rosemary Aquilina, who told serial sexual abuser Larry Nassar that if she could, she would allow some or many people to do to him what he did to others. So sexual violation is an atrocity unless it happens to the right person. They capitalize on women's justified fear and anger around mistreatment by men to shore up the status quo, to suggest that our current problems are not the result of fundamentally unjust institutions, but rather institutions that are only incidentally sexist. That means that those same institutions could become less so with the right adjustments, like more draconian sentencing for crimes against women, or more female judges. But the prison system is racist and brutal by design, not by accident or mismanagement, just as the court system regularly fails the most vulnerable because it was built to protect the powerful. The challenge of the 21st century is not to demand equal opportunity to participate in the machinery of oppression, revolutionary thinker Angela Davis has written. Rather, it is to identify and dismantle those structures. Yet leveraging our existing legal system for criminalization remains the go-to strategy for most feminists when it comes to dealing with objectionable behavior. The book, Can We All Be Feminists?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, top of the brand new week to you. The destruction of our government continues. There's a few bumps in the road. Our single guest for the day, Dean Obeidallah, will be telling us a little bit about that. Also, the Supreme Court is corrupt, Congress is a rubber stamp, and the president is lawless. What comes next? We'll talk about that in a minute. That's my op-ed today. Also, our democracy is under siege. Former Treasury secretaries, 5 former secretaries of the Treasury have written a scathing New York Times op-ed, basically against the dodgy threat to America. And Senator Andy Kim says actually I think that's Congressman Andy Kim, says he's open to shutting down the government if Trump continues dismantling agencies. Oh, and emboldened racists are now impersonating ICE agents throughout America. Look out. Dean Obeidallah is going to drop by in our second hour, as mentioned, talking about how Trump is making the U.S. less safe from terror attacks. Why would he want to do that? Actually, history gives us a good answer to that question. We'll get to that with Dean Obeidallah at the top of the next hour. In the third, and also in the second hour, Congress has collapsed, and ex-GOP insider says Republicans have no fix for the next big problems. In our third hour, why would Musk go after an agency that works for consumers? Well, turns out maybe there's a good reason, at least good from his point of view. And if, like many Republicans, you liked seeing L.A. burn down, you'll love what's coming this summer, because Trump just laid off thousands of federal firefighters. Isn't that great? Oh, my. All right, so my op-ed today, my daily take published over at HartmannReport.com is titled, "The Supreme Court is Corrupt, Congress is a Rubber Stamp, and the President is Lawless. What happens next?" And so J.D. Vance is now saying that he and Donald Trump don't obey federal judges. He tweeted, quote, "Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. This is how autocrats run things. It's an extraordinarily dangerous moment." And I think it's important that we put this in a historical context. It was Tuesday, July 17th, 1787, when 50-some-odd men got together at the what was then the City Hall in Philadelphia. It's now called Independence Hall. To write the Constitution. And they drew their inspiration for that day's efforts, that July 17th, 1787 effort, from Charles de Montesquieu, who had published a book. He was a French philosopher and a philosopher. In 1748, he wrote a book called The Spirit of the Laws. And in The Spirit of the Laws, Montesquieu pointed out that it is absolutely critical that if you want to have a government that doesn't devolve into tyranny, that doesn't become an autocratic, strongman, single-party state, that you must have at least 3 separate branches of government that have relatively equal powers relative to each other. In this case, the legislative, Congress, the House and Senate, the executive, the presidency, and the judiciary, the courts. In fact, this is a quote from his 1748 book. He said, "When the legislative and executive powers are united in the same person or in the same body of magistrates, there can be no liberty. Again, there is no liberty if the judiciary power be in the legislative and executive." So as this topic came up in the morning of July 17, 1787 in Philadelphia, James Madison stood up to speak. And, his words were recorded. He said, by quill pen, but recorded. He said, "If it be essential to the preservation of liberty that the legislative, executive, and judiciary powers be separate, it is essential to a maintenance of that separation that they should also be independent of each other. In like manner, a dependence of the executive, the president, on the legislative would render it the executor as well as the maker of laws. And then, according to the observation of Montesquieu, tyrannical laws may be made that they may be executed in a tyrannical manner. Montesquieu conceived it to be absolutely necessary to a well-constituted republic that the two should be kept distinct and independent of each other for guarding against the dangerous union of the legislative and executive departments." In other words, if the president were ever to dictate all terms to Congress, which then became a compliant rubber stamp, regardless of how excessive or even illegal the president's actions became, that, Madison said, finishing his little rant, quote, "may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny." We're there now. In simplified form, basically the system that Madison and his compatriots came up with was that the legislature creates agencies and funds them, the government. The president's job is to, and this is a direct quote from Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution, to quote, "take care that the laws be faithfully executed." Of course, the laws were created by Congress. And the role of the Article 3 courts is to make sure that neither overstep their authority and independently arbitrate disputes between them. Those decisions must be final. The Supreme Court's decisions must be final for the system to work. However, we've had this 44-year-long war against American government, against American democracy, against James Madison and the founders that was funded by a bunch of, initially some fossil fuel billionaires, later a larger group of billionaires, now the tech billionaires are in on it. This was originally called the Reagan Revolution, then it was called the Bush Revolution, then the Trump. There's 1,500 radio stations, there's 3 television networks, there's multiple newspapers and other publications, over 200 TV stations, hundreds of billions spent to purchase and then elect politicians. And all of this American democracy and government, after 240 years, is finally on the verge of collapsing and being replaced by something very much like Viktor Orban's Hungary or Vladimir Putin's Russia. Both houses of the Congress are controlled by Republicans, and in both cases, every single Republican senator and member of the House of Representatives has just rolled over and said, okay, Donald Trump gets whatever he wants. The president, so that's the legislative branch. The executive branch, the president is just nakedly breaking laws and just saying, Congress, courts, I dare you. And the courts, are just beginning to weigh in, but now J.D. Vance comes out over the weekend and says that he can do whatever he wants. He can ignore the courts. And in fact, the only way courts can have their opinions enforced is by having federal marshals do it. And who do the federal marshals work for? Oh, that's right, Pam Bondi. And who does Pam Bondi work for? Oh, that's right, Donald Trump. This is Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, who's investigating FBI agents who were looking into Donald Trump's crimes when he stole top-secret documents from the White House, took them down to Mar-a-Lago, and left them out where Russian spies could wander in and photocopy them. He conveniently left a giant photocopy machine there, too, right next to them. Wasn't that nice of him? This is the very definition of a constitutional crisis. When one branch of government says we're going to completely ignore the other branch of government, or even, in this case, the other 2 branches of government, and just do whatever the hell we want. We don't care what the law says. We don't care what the courts say. And we're going to find out. I mean, we're already hearing stories that even though a federal judge told Donald Trump and Elon Musk that they cannot suspend federal payments, that farmers in the Midwest and people all over the world are not getting federal payments. That money is being withheld in order to finance tax cuts for billionaires. And here we have, and by the way, this was all facilitated by the Supreme Court, by 5 corrupt Republicans on the Supreme Court in Citizens United in 2010, saying that bribery is just fine. If a billionaire wants to own a politician, no problem. And so here comes billionaire Elon Musk saying, I'm going to own Donald Trump. It only cost $270 million. Not even $1 billion. Not even $500 million. So, and then we look at, Elon Musk. Well, what's in this for him? Well, let's just go through the list. The FAA administrator had launched an investigation into SpaceX. Now he's been fired. The Department of Justice was looking into possible violations of securities and others laws by Musk and Tesla. That investigation is probably going to die. The USAID Inspector General was investigating Musk's Starlink. He's gone. The Department of Defense's Inspector General opened a review into alleged failures by Musk and SpaceX to properly disclose contact with foreign leaders, like Putin. He's been fired. The USDA Inspectors General was investigating alleged animal abuse at Neuralink, Musk's brain company. He's been fired. The National Transportation Safety Board, overseen by the DOT, had several open probes into Tesla. Odds are they'll be dropped if they haven't been already. The EPA had settled multiple lawsuits with Tesla for hazardous waste violations and violations of the Clean Air Act. Now that the EPA is being gutted, there probably won't be any more. The National Labor Relations Board, overseen by the Department of Labor, had 17 open investigations against Tesla and SpaceX for unfair labor practices, safety violations, and discriminatory work practices that are probably now, moot. The FCC was carrying out investigations and had issued court orders relative to Musk's business. The Federal Trade Commission was overseeing some of Musk's companies and had a consent decree in place. And the Air Force and the Pentagon's Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security had launched reviews into Musk and SpaceX's compliance with federal reporting requirements. I think you can safely say all of these burrs under Elon Musk's saddle have been removed. And if not so far, they probably will be soon. That $277 million investment that Musk made is going to pay billions in returns, it appears. Welcome to James Madison's very definition of tyranny. What can we do? Raise holy hell. Call your members of Congress, call your representative, call both of your senators, particularly if they're Republicans. And don't call them up and say, I'm a Democrat, I'm offended by the... Call up and sound like you're a Republican. This doesn't sound like conservative to me. This doesn't sound like small government to me. This sounds like a strongman takeover. I didn't sign up for this, that kind of thing. 202-224-3121. Or look up their local offices. Sometimes local offices are even better to reach out to, particularly when the federal offices are not taking calls or are shut down. The White House comment line is only working 12 hours a week right now, by the way. It's bizarre.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Former Treasury secretaries say our democracy is under siege, and racists are pretending they're ICE in order to rape women. Stick around. And welcome back. Stefan in Philadelphia. It's Stefan, right? Not Stephen?
Well, it is Stephen. I've got another call.
Stephen.
I don't know how to disconnect. So if you hear beeping, just try to ignore the beeping.
Okay.
Long story short, there's several things. I'll try to get to the point. There are 3 seats open, and odds are astronomical. But if they can flip all 3 seats, it's April Fool Day miracle. But they could then have control of the House.
You're right.
And there's a guy in Florida that's the 6th district. His name is Josh Wheel. I'm betting he has the worst odds because he's in Florida. Also, obviously they're out. They're a bunch of seats. But if you haven't really talked to him, or at least talked about him, it could be you have, it could be you can interview him, or that sort of thing. Again, my point is actually try to flip those seats. And my selling point for the Democrats, I'm just talking to myself, is that we want to work with Trump, but they want border security bill. Instead of doing it by fiat, let's have an organized bill that we all decide to work on. But the secret agenda, of course, is that if Trump keeps violating the law, file impeachment charges. So I don't know if you've already thought about that. There's one up in Stefanik's old district. There are 3, but I would have all 3 people, if they want to talk to you and see what they can say, because it's like.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's 3 elections coming up, 3 special elections coming up for the House of Representatives. One is somebody who passed away or retired. One is for Elise Stefanik, who went on to become, or is going to go on to become a cabinet member. I forget why the 3rd one is open, but yeah, you're right. And the Democrats are paying very close attention to this. So are Republican billionaires. And so these are going to be a heavy lift. I doubt that Democrats will take any of these 3 seats, but we'll see. We'll see. Stephen, thank you very much for pointing that out. Carlos in Carson, California. Hey, Carlos, what's on your mind today?
Well, United States Agency for International Development. I'm glad it's collapsing because it's under an aura of respectability. It was destabilizing governments like they did the overthrow of the government of Zelaya in Honduras, about 15 years ago. It was sending money out there to destabilize the country, and then the overthrow. And, of course, Hillary Clinton joined forces with McCain, as paradoxical as that sounds, and they were coordinating the whole operation over there. And, of course, they were using former
So you're in favor of telling the third world countries of the world that they should turn to China and Russia for help rather than us? I mean, I agree that there were some problems with USAID that should have been fixed. But when I was in Somalia, when I was in South Sudan, USAID was feeding people right next to me. When I was in Uganda, USAID was feeding people and running healthcare programs. That's why Sudan is talking about aligning themselves with us, and Uganda has long aligned themselves with us. You want these, and obviously this happened in other countries of the world, I just wasn't there, but you want these countries to start, like Thailand, to just say, screw America, they're not helping us out. China has spent $1 trillion on Belt and Road since they started it in 2014. We're spending $30 billion a year. That's pennies. That's a rounding error in the federal budget to keep over 100 countries on our side. Carlos, USAID might have screwed up some things, but throw the baby out with the bathwater, really?
Well, the chaos that they created in Honduras. How can you justify that? It turned it into a militarized country.
All right, I got it. Carlos, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. A lot of people wonder, where did this whole right-wing movement to basically gut our freedoms and end DEI and all this other, where did this all begin? It all started back in 1951 with a book called The Conservative Mind, From Burke to Eliot by Russell Kirk. And he argued that if the middle class ever got too big, you'd see young people and women and racial minorities all get up on their hind feet and start protesting and basically screwing up America. And in the 50s, even Republicans thought he was nuts. But then the 60s happened and all those protests, and suddenly Republicans thought, yeah, he's right. We've got to destroy the middle class, or at least cut it back. And that was Reagan's mandate when he came into office in 1981. There's a whole article about this. You can read all the details. It's titled The GOP's 60-Year Conspiracy to Kill Our Democracy. None dare call it treason, but I will. Over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
gathered in the summer heat to forge a brand new land. Three powers locked in balance, a system built to stand. They warned us of corruption, of kings who take it all. But now the billionaires are laughing, watching democracy fall. Madison warned us, but nobody cared. Now the wolves own the courthouse, the judge just stares. Congress takes orders, no fight, no debate, and the president's daring the world to complain. Welcome to Madison's nightmare, where the law is just a joke. The courts are corrupt, Congress is bought, and the presidency runs unchecked and lawless. What happens next? Tyranny's knocking. Who's gonna stop it?
About 25 minutes past the hour. Our democracy is under siege, writes 5 former Treasury secretaries. You may recognize these names: Robert Rubin, Lawrence Summers, Tim Geithner, Jacob Lew, and Janet Yellen, all former Treasury secretaries, wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, quote, "While significant data privacy, cybersecurity, and national security threats are gravely concerning, the constitutional issues are perhaps even more alarming." They're talking about the, quote, "arbitrary and capricious political control of federal payments." They go on, they're talking about, the DOGE workers. They say their power subjects Americans' payment system and the highly sensitive data within it to the risk of exposure potentially to our adversaries. People often rely on these funds for survival, making any risk of their cutoff or delay existential. Any hint of the selective suspension of congressionally authorized payment will be a breach of trust and ultimately a form of default. And our credibility, once lost, will prove difficult to regain. Yeah, you think? Meanwhile, Senator Andy Kim, I thought Andy Kim was a member of the House of Representatives. Did he get kicked up to the Senate? Oh yeah, he replaced Bob Menendez, right? Ah, okay. Senator Andy Kim says he's open to working with other Democrats to deny Republicans the votes necessary to keep the government funded. Yeah, March 14th, I think, is the deadline for coming up with, a new budget and funding the government for the next year, or there will be a shutdown. Senator Kim says, we could just back out of this, basically. I'm paraphrasing. We could just back Democrats, and I don't think the Republicans can pull this thing off. We'll see.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Now, my guess is no matter how bad the deal is, Trump is going to bring these Republicans to heel. But it's going to be interesting to see.
Today we're reading from David Blight's book, Frederick Douglass, Prophet of Freedom. This is from the introduction. In his speech at the dedication of the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., September 24, 2016, President Barack Obama delivered what he termed a, quote, clear-eyed view of a tragic and triumphant history of black Americans in the United States. He spoke of a history that is central to the larger American story, one that is both contradictory and extraordinary. He likened the African American experience to the infinite depths of Shakespeare and Scripture. The, quote, embrace of truth as best we can know it, said the president, is, quote, where real patriotism lies. Naming some of the major pivots of the country's past, Obama wrapped up his central theme in a remarkable sentence about the Civil War era. Quote, we've buttoned up our Union blues to join the fight for our freedom. We've railed against injustice for decade upon decade, a lifetime of struggle and progress and enlightenment that we see etched in Frederick Douglass's mighty leonine gaze, end quote. How Americans reacted to Douglass's gaze, indeed how we gaze back at his visage, and more important, how we read him, appropriate him, or engage his legacies, informs how we use our past to determine who we are. Douglass's life and writing emerged from nearly the full scope of the 19th century, representative of the best and the worst in the American spirit. Douglass constantly probed the ironies of America's contradictions over slavery and race. Few Americans use Shakespeare and the Bible to comprehend his story and that of his people as much as Douglass. And there may be no better example of an American radical patriot than the slave who became a lyrical prophet of freedom, natural rights, and human equality. Obama channeled Douglass in his dedication speech, knowingly or not. So do many people today. Born Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey, a slave, in Talbot County, Maryland, in February 1818, the future Frederick Douglass was the son of Harriet Bailey, one of 5 daughters of Betsy Bailey, and with some likelihood his mother's white owner. He saw his mother for the last time in 1825, though he hardly knew her. She died the following year. Douglass lived 20 years as a slave and nearly 9 years as a fugitive slave subject to recapture. From the 1840s to his death in 1895, he attained international fame as an abolitionist, editor, orator of almost unparalleled signature, and the author of 3 autobiographies that are classics of the genre. As a public man, he began his abolitionist career 2 decades before America would divide and fight a civil war over slavery that he openly welcomed. Douglass was born in a backwater of the slave society of the South, just as steamboats appeared in bays and on American rivers, and before the telegraph, the railroad, and the rotary press changed human mobility and consciousness. He died after the emergence of electric lights, the telephone, and the invention of the phonograph. The renewed orator and traveler loved and used most of these elements of modernity and technology. Douglass was the most photographed American of the 19th century, explained in this book, and especially by the intrepid research of 3 other scholars I write upon. Although it can never really be measured, he may also have been, along with Mark Twain, the most widely traveled American public figure of his century. By the 1890s, in sheer miles and countless number of speeches, he had few rivals as a lecturer in the golden age of oratory. It is likely that more Americans heard Frederick Douglass speak than any other public figure of his time. Indeed, to see or hear Douglass became a kind of wonder of the American world. He struggled as well with the pleasures and perils of fame as much as anyone else in his century, with the possible exceptions of General Ulysses S. Grant or P.T. Barnum. Douglass's dilemma with fame was a matter of decades, not merely of moments, and fraught with racism. The orator and writer lived to see and interpret black emancipation, to work actively for women's rights long before they were achieved, to realize the civil rights triumphs and tragedies of Reconstruction, and to witness and contribute to America's national expansion in the Gilded Age. He lived to the age of lynching and Jim Crow laws, when America collapsed into retreat from the real victories and revolutions in race relations that he had helped to win. He played a pivotal role in America's second founding out of the apocalypse of the Civil War, and he very much wished to see himself as a founder and defender of the Second American Republic. In one lifetime of anti-slavery, literary, and political activism, Douglass was many things, and the set of apparent paradoxes makes his story so attractive to biographers, as well as to so many constituencies today. He was a radical thinker and a proponent of classic 19th century political liberalism. At different times, he hated and loved his country. He was a ferocious critic of the United States and all its hypocrisies, but also, after emancipation, became a government bureaucrat, a diplomat, and a voice for territorial expansion. He strongly believed in self-reliance and demanded an activist interventionist government at all levels to free slaves, defeat the Confederacy, and to protect black citizens against terror and discrimination. Douglass was a serious constitutional thinker. Few Americans have ever analyzed race with more poignancy and nuance than this mostly self-taught genius with words. He was a radical editor, writer, and activist. The book Frederick Douglass by David Blight.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program, or that after the show we send out Sue's stack, a list of every topic I've discussed, along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air. It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
Trump's on the screen with his circus lies. 40 minutes of fear, 40 minutes televised. He's ranting, he's raving like it's all for show, while Biden's out there, but nobody knows. 60 million jobs in 4 short years, built with truth, not chaos or fear. But the cameras don't care. Where are the Democrats to win this game? Where are the Democrats? Why don't they fight? Trump screaming fascism in broad daylight. The fire's still burning, but no one's there. Where are the leaders who used to care? Where's the FDRs, the LBJs calling out the Greens, showing us the way? If democracy's dying, we can't sit back. So where are the Democrats? Kamala said it's a 5-1
Welcome back, 35 minutes past the hour. Just a few quick facts here. 8 of the 10 poorest states in the U.S. are controlled by Republicans. 10 of the last 11 recessions started under Republican presidents. The only 3 presidents to lower the deficit in the last 50 years were Obama, Clinton, and Biden. 6 out of 7 presidents with the highest job creation rate since 1945 were Democrats. And GDP growth under Republican presidents averages 2.5%, while it averages 4.3% under Democrats. So, meanwhile, emboldened racists are now impersonating ICE agents. Alex Breeden's headline over at the Daily Kos. Authorities in at least 3 states have arrested men for impersonating ICE agents to harass and assault people of color. One of the men arrested is Sean Michael Johnson of South Carolina, who in disturbing video footage is seen leaning into a Hispanic driver's window saying, "Y'all got caught. Where are you from? Mexico? You from Mexico?" Johnson asked before yelling, "You're going back to Mexico." In the clip, Johnson leans over the driver, grabs the key, the driver's accent. The driver then calls a friend and says in Spanish, "I don't know, man, he's saying immigration." Angrily, Johnson knocks the phone out of the man's hand. "Now, don't be speaking that pig Latin in my effing country," he says. And the guy, the passenger in the car, says in Spanish, "He's crazy. He's a racist, man." Johnson's now been charged with three counts of kidnapping. His family told the judge he has alcohol and mental health problems. Similarly, a Temple University student was arrested for impersonating an ICE agent in Philadelphia. His name is Aiden Stiegelman. He was acting alongside 2 friends who are still at large. They were trying to get access to a university residence building, claiming to be ICE agents wearing black shirts with police and ICE on them. And in Raleigh, North Carolina, Carl Thomas Bennett is accused of impersonating an ICE agent and then raping a woman. Bennett allegedly threatened to deport the woman if she did not have sex with him. He also reported some sort of card with a badge on it. Daily Kos reached out to ICE spokespeople to ask, what's going on with this, but ICE is not returning calls to the press, or at least to Daily Kos, apparently. This is what happens when you get racist laws. You empower the racists. And, oh, boy, do they feel empowered right now. It's incredible. So what's on your mind today? James in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, James, what's up?
Good morning, Tom. Up indeed. It's frightening. And you have to say, where is the end of this going to be? Because any judge is going to interpret the Constitution the way it was written, the way the black and white words are on, that there's supposed to be 3 equal but separate branches of government, and one is supposed to have checks and balances on the other.
Yeah.
But when now I would thank goodness the entire court system, but when they've concentrated on the Supreme Court, wasn't that Karl Rove's agenda about 20 years ago?
Rove certainly was enthusiastic about it, but it's principally been Leonard Leo's agenda, to the best of my knowledge.
Oh, of course, but that's now. I mean, this didn't just happen.
No, this goes back to Nixon. I mean, you had I'm forgetting his name now, but he was the liberal, the single most liberal member of the Supreme Court. And Nixon had John Mitchell threaten to investigate his wife, and that essentially caused him to resign to prevent his wife from having to be dragged before Congress and before the Department of Justice. And he had done nothing wrong. She had done nothing wrong, but he resigned. And so that was, that gave Nixon. I believe that was the seat that Nixon put Lewis Powell into, but I could be wrong on that. But it was right around that time. That was in the early 70s. And that was when the court finally went to the right. The court had been to the left all the years prior to that, even though it had had a majority of Republican appointees. Earl Warren and several of the other people who'd been appointed by Eisenhower, had kind of turned to the left. Abe Fortas was the guy who got kicked out. Thank you,
That's right.
Yeah.
Fortas.
Yeah, Abe Fortas.
But,
I've been saying for a long time we need to pull an Abe Fortas. We need to be publicly humiliating, Clarence Thomas and Alito, Sam Alito. But apparently they're not the kind of people who care what you have to say. Humiliation is something that they're just fine with because they just ignore it. They're the kings of America, and they think that they're bulletproof, or metaphorically speaking. So
unfortunately, the times of cognitive dissonance, disinformation, people who are willfully ignorant, who will not consider reality. It's frightening, but where is this going to go? It's like you said, when the judges make these decrees, who's going to enforce it?
One of two things happens, James. Either Trump prevails and we end our system of government that has, done well for us for 236 years now, I think, or the courts prevail and a few Republicans in Congress grow a spine and Trump gets back down. I'm not holding my breath on that, but those are basically the choices. And I'm guessing that we'll know within the next couple of days. James, thanks for the call. Andre in Chicago. Hey, Andre, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good morning to you, Tom. Happy Monday to you.
Back at you.
Hey, Tom, Hey, thank you. Tom, listen, Donald Trump had talked repeatedly about pulling out of NATO. He said it many times. Then he's picked a fight with NATO, saying that they should pay their fair share. My question is that if Donald Trump goes through with this taking over Gaza, would NATO be obligated to go along with them? And if they do, who could stop it from happening over there? Who could stop from taking over Palestine? Because Hamas is a small army, and I don't think they compete with the United States. What do you think of that, Tom?
NATO is technically not required to go along. Even if we were attacked in Gaza, we would have to be attacked in the United States. Article 5 says if any country is under attack from an external force, all of NATO gets together and goes along with it. That said, though, when George W. Bush lied to the world and said that, Al-Qaeda was being sponsored by Afghanistan and by Saddam Hussein in Iraq, all of the NATO nations, or at least most of the NATO nations, sent troops to both Afghanistan and Iraq. So there's precedent for what you're describing, Andre. I don't think that they will go along with it now. I think Trump has, really damaged our relations with NATO. I do think it's very possible that he will pull us out of NATO, and if he does, then Europe is going to have one hell of a crisis. So great question, Andre. Thank you. William in Caledonia, Illinois. Hey, William, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. Let me go here just a little bit without interrupting me, because that's how my mind works. Sorry about that, but
I'm listening.
Anyway, okay, I want to roll back here to Trump's first term, 2017. What happens in Saudi Arabia? We got the purging of the princes, several other things. Possibility our CIA helped him get the information. We roll along, we get the orb. Now we roll into Jared walks out of the Middle East with billions, and next thing we know, here the Saudis are again, and they're financing the Twitter through Elon.
Yep.
And then Elon goes on Joe Rogan and he gets a little stoned and he makes kind of fun of being the world's richest public figure. He talks hey, look, these guys are really rich. They don't report their incomes. They don't report anything else. And, you know, in 2023, China, I believe maybe Xi personally brokered a deal between Iran and the Saudis, kind of put a cap on the hostilities or whatever. And, you know, that's there. But right now, the money that is pouring in, the meme coin that overnights, and you look at the meme coin, and all they say is, "Oh, it's whales investing." Well, I'm not reading National Geographic. Here's tons and tons of money here, Tom. I'm looking at the end of this, and here's what my biggest fear is: our American military is going to be mercenaries for the Saudis. And the other day, when Donald said obliterate Iran, that was his message. And I'm fearing that the most. All of the other stuff, and thank you very much for keeping that blinding light and them shiny objects and keeping people on task to look at the facts.
Yeah. I share your concern, William. I think Trump, right at this particular moment in his presidency or in his career or in his life or whatever, is lusting after a Nobel Peace Prize, and he thinks the Middle East can get it to him. I'm very skeptical of that. Certainly taking over Gaza isn't going to do it. Saudi Arabia has already said no to that. But yeah, going after Iran, you know, he's also talking about cutting a new deal with them. So we'll see. I think the Iranians are concerned. But anybody who thinks that you can take on Iran, I mean, Iran is an advanced nation, million people. I think it's 74 million people. It's huge, and they've got a massive.
You're
military.
listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
So taking down Iran is going to be a hell of a lot more difficult than apparently anybody in the GOP thinks. Stay tuned. And welcome back, Gordon in O'Brien, Oregon. Hey, Gordon, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Good to talk to you again. I talked to you last Monday, I think, about the states, the power of the states, and
by the way, just to correct something I just said, the population of Iran is 89 million. I thought it was 74 million. Back to you.
Oh, okay. So anyway, you know, last week, Letitia James and Attorney General of New York and 18 other states, they sued about the Treasury computer being hacked into by Musk, et cetera. And the judge said, you have to stop doing that. You got to destroy all of everything you've copied.
Right.
And they're going to have a hearing this Friday. But I think the states are sovereign. You know, it's part of a federal system. But I think what Letitia James should do, and, you know, because I think the citizens of this country, they want some tangible action. They don't just want to hear words and stuff. I think what Letitia James should do is detain Musk and bring him in for questioning so she can prepare indictments. And, you know, the state police and the National Guard and the other states have the same. So I think it's getting to the point where she's going to have to take, you know, real firm action.
You can't detain
the president. I think
the
the headlines around the world, Letitia James detains the richest man in the world.
No, I got it, Gordon. But, you know, the states are not sovereign. They have a certain level of limited sovereignty. But the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution makes the states subordinate to the federal government, number one. Number two, there are multiple rules, not just with the Justice Department, and also the Supreme Court decision granting Trump immunity from prosecution for crimes he commits while in office for official acts. All of these things would make it quite impossible for Letitia James to move against Donald Trump in any way that threatened his physical person, you know, arresting him, imprisoning him, things like that. And she can't bring charges against him right now. In fact, you know, Judge Merchan had to drop all those charges against him. So, you know, that's where we're at, Gordon. You know, I love your idea, but it ain't going to work. Thanks for the call, though. Ted in San Antonio, Texas. Hey, Ted, what's up?
Yes, hi. I was wondering, are you familiar with ballot proof?
Are you talking about that program that was put together back in 2020 to you know, by a bunch of hackers that had to do with ballot images?
Yeah,
I read the article about it over the weekend.
Yeah, it was created by one of Elon's DOGE bros, Ethan.
Yeah.
And he basically hasn't stopped working on it. As of July of 2024, he's still working on a program that he says cures ballots, but what it does is it changes ballots.
That's what I've read. I can't verify that, but I ran that by the way, that article that popped up over this weekend specifically about this. I ran it by Greg Palast over the weekend. Greg's out of the country right now, but I sent it to him and said, "What do you think of this?" And he said, who knows, but probably not. He said, really what happened is voter suppression. Over 4 million people who wanted to vote would have voted. We're not allowed to vote. So yeah, I'm familiar with it, Ted. Let's wait for the other shoe to drop. I mean, it's an interesting assertion, but we still need some evidence. Ted, thanks for the call. It's 10 minutes before the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Stay tuned. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So between his tax cuts and crashing the debt ceiling and shifting billions of Treasury dollars into crypto and tariffs and all this other stuff, Trump is threatening to crash our economy. And he doesn't seem to be particularly worried about that. Why would that be? Well, first off, economic disasters are great excuses to cut taxes. Both Reagan and George W. Bush used recessions as their excuse to stimulate the economy by cutting trillions from the taxes of billionaires. Secondly, economic crises increase the tolerance for strongman governments. Hitler rode to power in Europe based on the Great Depression. And third, billionaires make a fortune when there's a market crash because they can buy all the stock that average people are trying to unload from their 401ks to pay the damn rent. There's a whole article about this that lays the whole thing out over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled Crashing the Economy, Trump's Blueprint for Power and Profit. Check it out.
Elon Musk steps into the light, billionaire dreams burning bright. A fascist salute to the crowd takes flight, and the shadow it casts chills the night. My heart's with you, he calls to the throne. Together we'll fix what's been broken too long. But as his hand rises, the echoes take form. A specter of history, fueling the storm. Fascist salutes and shadows, what do they mean? A flash of the past in the modern machine. The richest of men with the world in his palm. Stirs restless waters, ignites the alarm.
52 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Helen in Florissant, Missouri. Hey, Helen, what's up?
Well, I got the first ray of hope over the weekend. Pope Francis and Al Gore and some other leaders in other countries gathered together for a conference. And they're saying that the only way that we have a future is with our children. And so they're gathering together to make some big statement, basically, about the health of our children, that they need food, they need health, they need a clean environment, they need education and freedom. And so that's the points that they're making. And I hate to tell Trump, but I think the Pope has more power than Trump.
With regard to the United States, I don't think so. But I get what you're saying, Helen. I mean, the Pope had been saying to outlaw abortion for years and years and years, and it only, it only happened recently. And it wasn't the Pope who made it happen.
But many people in the United States that may have listened to Trump will listen to the Pope first.
Yeah, hopefully. And I was unaware of this meeting, but, hopefully something good comes out of it and some widespread publicity happens. I'm skeptical, but we'll see. Helen, thank you for informing me about that. I appreciate the call. Thank you so much. Ziggy in Oneida, New York. Hey, Ziggy, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I attended 2 protests last week, and I was happy with the number of people we have, but I was not satisfied. We need more people going out on the street protesting. Trying to call and change these guys is not going to do it. We need people out and about because we've got a chance to save this country only if we do some work doing that. And that means getting out and protesting.
I agree. Tell me about the protests you attended, Ziggy.
I attended one in Albany and one in Binghamton, and they were both very good. We protested, marched around the Capitol. Also, we went and visited our senators, and I did speak to one of the senators' assistants. What happens there is they send an assistant down who talks to us.
This is U.S. senators or state senators?
U.S. senators.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and they take notes, but everyone's got everything they want to tell them, and they kind of know what we want anyways. So what I told her when I had a chance to is I said, I want you to tell your boss, Chuck Schumer, that something that he doesn't want to hear. He's got to stop coming out with his glasses over this end of his nose, reading a speech, and not inspiring anyone whatsoever. I told her you might as well send John Fetterman out there and have him sing I Love Mar-a-Lago. We need people with fire in their belly out there fighting for us.
Yeah.
And she kind of said, okay, she'll actually pass that one on.
Was that at Schumer's office that you said that?
Yes.
Wow. I'm good on you.
Yeah. Well, we got to start fighting. We got to get them to start doing something. I can talk to you all day about it, and you already know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But, when you hear already, the Republicans are saying already that we are in a post-constitutional period.
Right.
So some people doesn't start waking up to.
Did you visit Gillibrand's office? Your other senator?
Yes, and we talked to her. Actually, I just talked to her on basically, she has to be out there. We don't see her,
Did you see her in person, or did you talk to her people?
No. The way it worked is you went to the office, and then they sent somebody down to all the protesters, and then that somebody would stay around to talk to people individually.
I see.
And that's how it worked.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Okay.
I get it. Ziggy, thanks for the report, and good on you. And hopefully more people will join you in the future. Endbribes.com, I'm assuming?
Yes. I'm still doing that, definitely. But got to help save our country.
There you go. Ziggy, thank you. We'll be right back with Dean Obeidallah.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free, and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
Today we're reading about Thunderdome politics, an uncivil war taking back our democracy in an age of Trumpian disinformation and Thunderdome politics by Greg Sargent, the Washington Post columnist. This is from his chapter on voter suppression. It's page 37. Republicans and Democrats inhabit different political realities, as mentioned in a previous chapter. But there are certain facts about our politics that are just objectively true. One of them is this. Generally speaking, efforts to make it harder to vote are almost always pushed by Republicans. You cannot understand what is happening in American politics right now without recognizing this stark and very fundamental difference between the two major political parties. During this decade, procedural hurdles were put into place in around 20 states that in some manner or other have made it harder to vote or to register to vote, or have undone previous efforts to make voting or registering easier, or have otherwise threatened serious disenfranchisement. Most of them were the creation of Republican lawmakers and officials. The difference in the two parties' national platforms for 2016 tells the story. The GOP platform champions additional hurdles that are absurdly disproportionate to the phantom abuse it alleges, while the Democratic platform champions multiple specific ways to make it easier to vote, not harder. The most common and controversial of methods used by Republicans to suppress Democratic turnout is the requirement that would-be voters present identification at the polls. The game here tends to turn on requiring forms of ID that some groups are less likely to have, making participation harder for them. Other restrictions include techniques like cutting back on early voting and making it harder to register, both of which have, in recent years, been instituted in multiple states. Republicans who have passed laws making it harder to vote have tended to claim such measures are necessary to protect against, quote, voter fraud. We'll look at this in more detail below, but for now, note that most of the states that have passed such measures did so while under Republican control. As New York University political scientist Samuel Isikoff has memorably put it, the single predictor necessary to determine whether a state will impose voter access restrictions is whether Republicans control the ballot access process. Scholars trace the modern era of warfare over election rules to the intensely contested presidential election of 2000, in which a divided Supreme Court halted the recount in Florida, throwing the presidency to George W. Bush. The closeness and partisan acrimony of that contest, combined with the intense national focus on election rules that accompanied the court battle over it, helped persuade both parties to invest much more attention and energy on those rules. As a result, both the implementation of measures restricting the ballot and the legal battles over them have intensified in recent years. A brief glance at the surprising history of voter ID laws begins to tell the story of this tightening. In the 1970s, several states implemented voter ID measures, but all of them provided for ways that voters without the proper ID could cast a ballot. By 2000, there were 14 such laws, and they had been implemented by politicians in both parties. But by the mid-2000s, amid rising post-2000 acrimony, a handful of red states began implementing voter ID laws that the nonpartisan National Conference of State Legislatures described as, quote, strict, meaning that they make it easy to disqualify those who don't pass muster. After one of those laws in Indiana was challenged and then upheld in 2008 by the Supreme Court, an escalation began that gained momentum in the Obama era. From 2010 onward, the adoption of voter ID laws in general and of strict ones in particular accelerated. Though a handful were blocked in the courts, as of this writing, a total of 34 states have voter ID laws in effect, 24 that are deemed non-strict and 10 that are deemed strict. The strict ones are in red states or in swing states where they were implemented by Republicans. The story is very similar if you evaluate the state's voting rules in a broader way, by including not just voter ID measures, but also cutbacks to early voting and restrictions on registration. Here the trend is just as pronounced. After the 2010 elections, the Brennan Center for Justice documented a sharp rise in efforts to pass such measures in the state legislatures across the country. Not all these efforts bore fruit, but many did. By the time voting took place in Election Day 2016, some 14 states had these new restrictions in place for the first time in a presidential election. Now, as of this writing, by the Brennan Center's count, some 20 states have successfully implemented either strict voting ID requirements or cutbacks to early voting, or restrictions on registration, or other measures with meaningful disenfranchising effects. If you're a liberal who's frustrated by the seemingly unbreakable Republican dominance of national politics, not to mention GOP control of most state governments across the country, then the chances are that these restrictions figure heavily into your explanation of this GOP supremacy. Indeed, social media has been absolutely saturated in recent years with variations of the lament that Republican political dominance is largely maintained through a combination of nefarious and undemocratic tactics, such as ballot restrictions that keep constituencies unfriendly to the GOP from voting, and extreme gerrymanders that have, in effect, built a fortress around the GOP's majority in the House of Representatives. Democrats frequently invoke the GOP's use of these tactics, often justifiably, to raise money and to galvanize turnout. This narrative contains some important truths. Some of the forms that these restrictions on voting access have taken in recent years are diabolically obvious in their efforts to keep constituencies supportive of Democrats from voting. Still others boast the distinction of being more insidiously designed and thus less obvious in their intentions. The book is An Uncivil War by Greg Sargent of The Washington Post.
We say fight back!
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, welcome to our second hour of our program here. On the line with us, my buddy Dean Obeidallah, the host of the Dean Obeidallah Show, weekdays 6 to 9 p.m. right here on Sirius XM Progress Channel 127. If you don't subscribe to his newsletter, Dean's Report, you need to. Just go to Substack.com and plug in Dean's Report in the little search box, and it'll pop right up. And, it's free. Just check it out. It's really worth the effort. And, in fact, he's got two brilliant Dean's Reports from the last couple of days that I wanted to talk to him about. Dean, I'm so glad you came on the program today. The first here, one is a good news one, more profiles of courage. And the other is, why is Trump making America less safe from terrorist attacks? These two, both of them, really, impressed me and kind of blew my mind this week. Let's start with, why is Trump making the U.S. less safe?
Right. Well, that is the more concerning one, right? Because I think we need to amplify the good stories out there, because corporate media has made Trump omnipotent. But in terms of making America less safe, that's not just my opinion. I had Congressman Dan Goldman last week, who's on the House Homeland Security Committee, former federal prosecutor, and Frank Figliuzzi, who served in the FBI for over 25 years. And they both noted that Trump's purge of FBI agents, his offering to buy out anyone in the CIA or NSA who wants to go, and they're not replacing them with people who are public servants. We learned over the weekend from the Washington Post that you have to answer yes to two questions. Was the 2020 election stolen? And was January 6th an inside job? And if you answer no, you don't get hired. I'm not kidding. That was in the Washington Post reporting on Sunday. So Trump is making us less safe. And we know he's making us less safe. That's indisputed.
Well, let me add one thing to this, too.
Sure.
If I could just add one other way that he's making us unsafe. You'll recall when bin Laden wrote his letter to America, he told us that he was going, this was 1998, that he was going to strike us because Herbert Walker Bush had convinced Saudi Arabia to put an Air Force base, the bin Sultan Air Force base in Saudi Arabia, to stage, flights, F-16s or F-35s or whatever they are, into Iraq. And then we never pulled our troops out. And bin Laden was really pissed off that there were, men, watching porn and women driving cars with their elbows showing inside Saudi Arabia. And he said, if you don't remove these people, I'm going to hit you. And 3 weeks after 9/11, George W. Bush pulled all of the American troops out of the bin Sultan Air Force Base and shut that thing down. But that, he was, the reason we got hit on 9/11 was because we were occupying Arab soil. And now just this morning, Trump just came out and said, I forget the word about, or something, words to that effect, about buying and owning Gaza. What,
Look, I'm not right.
Piss
I
off
don't know.
a few people, you think?
It would, and I don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, just today, Israel and Netanyahu complied with another term in the ceasefire, and they're withdrawing troops from the northern part of.
No, but I mean,
Gaza.
just the rhetoric is enough to cause people
Well,
to
the
want to
rhetoric,
attack us.
Wanting to attack us and actually engaging in a terrorist attack is a different thing. To me, there are numerous threats. It's not just from Islamic threats, from radicals. You've got the biggest threat in America is right-wing white supremacists. That's a threat we have to deal with. Absolutely. It doesn't matter where the threat comes from. The question is, what happens when there is a terrorist attack on U.S. soil? Because there will be. And Trump, I think, is making us less safe. I'm not going to say he's rooting for a terrorist attack because I don't have evidence of that. I think it's fair to say that, but I'm not going to say that. What I'm going to say is, what's he going to do when it happens, when it comes? And history tells us what he will do. And Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny tells us what he's going to do. And, you know, the picture on my magazine, on my article is the Reichstag fire from 1933 Germany. Hitler used that to get the Enabling Act passed, which made him a dictator. The day after the fire burned down the German parliament, he said that you can arrest anybody and hold them for unlimited periods of time. It doesn't matter who calls the Reichstag fire. The debate is, did Hitler do it himself? The point is, when that happened, how will Trump respond? Everyone listening knows Trump will use any emergency, any attack to consolidate power and take away and suspend more of our civil liberties. We all know that. There's no debating that. That's why when he's making it safe, when you do 2 + 2 = 4, that's where we're going. And that's what so concerns me, Tom, is that Trump is taking us, he's following the authoritarian playbook on numerous issues. I keep writing about it and flagging it for people, from defending the January 6th terrorists to using the FCC to go after the media, and the checklist goes off and off. And this is just another one on that list. We are seeing the story. It's not a surprise, folks, when Trump has the military in the blue cities occupying us, taking over media outlets and suspending our civil liberties. It's all there in front of us. The question is, does that happen or not? But don't be surprised if it does, because everything is telling us that's where he's going. It's not hyperbolic. It's not speculative. This is the playbook he's following.
Yeah, yeah. And Putin, used that attack on the theater in Chechnya to radically expand his power. I mean, there's a long history of this. You're absolutely right. And when Maris van der Lubbe set the Reichstag on fire, within 30 minutes, Hitler had rushed to the scene and grabbed a microphone and said, "This is a sign from God," that he was ordained to rule in Germany. It's pretty mind-boggling stuff. So I agree with you. The other piece you wrote, more profiles of courage, patriotism, and resistance in standing up to Trump. This was kind of an uplifting piece. Tell us about this.
We need uplifting. My goal on my show and in my articles, I've done this 2 weeks in a row, is to try to amplify the profiles in patriotism, courage, compassion, and resistance, because they're out there. They're not hard to find. Corporate media is just ignoring them because they're too busy making Trump the dictator they want. And I say that sincerely of the executives who really want the tax cuts, the mergers that Trump is offering, and less regulations will trade our democracy for it. But look, this week, no one's more critical of Democrats not fighting, Tom, than me. I was on the show talking about how Democrats need to punch Trump in the face every day, come up with ways to get the media narrative away from him. But this week, we saw Democrats actually go outside of the Capitol, go to rallies outside of U.S. Treasury and USAID. We also had profiles in courage in terms of different grassroots organizations and unions bringing lawsuits, and then numerous judges standing up to Trump, even a Trump-appointed one, Carl Nichols, and a Reagan-appointed one, and numerous Democratic-appointed ones who stood up to Trump and stopped them on issue after issue, from the buyout to the birthright citizenship, trying to rewrite the 14th Amendment, to the spending freeze that he wants to do, to barring Elon Musk and his minions from getting the data. And the court order is they must immediately destroy all the data they have gathered. And people go, well, how do you enforce it? Well, it's inherent in the courts to do contempt, which can be fines or imprisonment. That's inherent. That's how you do it. The only one protected from that is Trump, who will not be fined, of course. But you can't protect someone. You can't give someone immunity for civil contempt for enforcing an order. It's not criminal. So the reality is that judges are doing the great things. All of us together, we are collectively standing against the abyss of fascism. We are facing the abyss of fascism right in front of us. It's right here. I never expected it would be here.
Yeah,
but we're facing it now.
I didn't either, although I've been warning about it for years. I started, my voice started getting higher and higher back after 9/11 when Bush pushed through the Patriot Act and opened Guantanamo and just openly defied the Constitution and international law at Abu Ghraib and other places. But yeah, I didn't think it would go this bad this fast. It's pretty friggin' shocking. Dean, you're an attorney. I'm not. We're both familiar with judicial supremacy and judicial review. You know, the doctrines that largely came out of Marbury versus Madison, but have been respected all these years. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on, you know, it looks like the Trump administration right now, or the Musk administration, I think probably more properly, is defying a court order to get out of the Treasury Department and to stopping the Treasury payments. There's a couple of other court orders that it looks like they're also defying that are going to be re-examined, one this afternoon and one on Thursday of this week. A year ago, J.D. Vance pointed to President Andrew Jackson ignoring two U.S. Supreme Court orders. One he didn't actually defy, but he ignored, one having to do with the second U.S. bank, and then the second one, the Trail of Tears. And that story is a little more complicated, too, because it was really executed by the next president. But, you know, he got the gears rolling. And then earlier this week, he tweeted, or a couple days ago, he tweeted that the executive does not have to do what the courts say. The courts can't micromanage the president, basically. These things are, you know, in defiance of a traditional understanding of the separation of powers in the United States. My understanding is that only federal marshals can basically enforce the decrees of federal judges. And federal marshals, of course, are overseen by Pam Bondi, who's overseen by Donald Trump. What happens when the Trump administration just comes right out and says, you know, we're going to ignore these court orders, particularly if one comes down from the Supreme Court? If they just say, we're just going to ignore it. We're just going to keep on putting people in Gitmo. We're just going to keep on, you know, withholding funds. We're going to, you know, we're just going to run this country like I'm a dictator.
Well, that's their goal. But here, look, I think even the Supreme Court of the United States would uphold using the contempt power, which is inherent in our court system from day one, to enforce judgments. Because if not, then the Supreme Court is making themselves just 9 people in a robes walking around the building.
But how do you enforce a judgment against Trump?
The court order will be not against Donald Trump. It's right now, you have to look at each of the cases. For example, the U.S. Treasury case, it's against DOGE, right? It's against the DOGE guys and Elon Musk. The court's going to order them, to compel them to comply with the order, destroy the information we told you.
It already has, but it looks like that's not the case, and there's no evidence that they've destroyed the information.
Well, if there's any evidence they have not, then the litigants on the other side who brought the lawsuit are going to say to the judge, they're in violation of the order. The judge is going to say, I'm compelling compliance of it. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fine you every day X amount. And if you don't do it, then I'm going to put you in a prison cell until you give us the documents. And if Pam Bondi says, I'm not going to allow court orders to be upheld, then the court will order Pam Bondi and DOJ to do the right thing. Because it's leading to a constitutional crisis. But if people could just simply say, we're going to ignore your orders, we would not have the system already. There's already there's checks. There's certain ways there that you're going to find people, federal marshals, and do the right thing. You're going to find a court that's going to impose $1,000 day, $10,000, $1 million day fines on Elon Musk and be enforced. Care? He might not care, but he'll care if he goes to a prison cell. If he's rounded up, Donald Trump can't stop that. You know, we can't put Trump in prison, right? Because DOJ's memos.
But that's my point. I think he can stop it because it would require federal marshals who work for him.
They work for him, but they're federal marshals who are going to be more loyal to the Constitution than Donald Trump, who are going to defy his orders.
Well, I admire your optimism here, Dean.
There's going to be. You don't need a lot. You need a few. Then the system ends. Then Tom, the whole thing ends.
I know.
It would have ended before, though.
I'm as freaked out as I can get.
If it was that simple, it would have ended before.
Hang on.
There's
We're going to get stepped on.
Sure. This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's the great Dean Obeidallah. You can hear his show on Sirius XM Progress Channel 127. Check out his Substack newsletter. It's free. It's called The Dean's Report. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you.
And welcome back. Mark in Las Vegas, Nevada. Hey, Mark, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hi. There we go. I just took it off speakerphone. The topic that I wanted to talk about briefly was modern monetary theory and economist Stephanie Kelton, who I know you've interviewed in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I want people to become much more aware of what she's talking about, because when we talk about public debt, the deficit spending and all of this that the conservatives really rail on about, people need to understand one simple thing. Public debt is private market black ink.
It's private savings.
Flows.
It's the easier way to say it.
It all flows, and not just savings, spending. Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, all these programs don't go into savings. People spend them into the economy. When people receive Medicare money, they're not receiving it. The doctors, the hospitals, the for-profit industry is the one receiving this. So when conservatives talk about wanting to cut $1 trillion out of the federal budget, what they're really going to do is cut their own throats, because that goes into the private market and will cause a depression. People need to understand this very important fact. So
I
if
agree.
you want to fight conservatives, if you want to fight them, people, everybody, you too, Tom, you need to make sure that message gets out there. And it's like, so you want to cut government spending? Well, that means cutting the oil industry. That means cutting profit for healthcare industries and everybody else, the grocery stores, you name it. So you want to cut your own throats and take all the money out? Well, be my guest.
Yeah, I guarantee you they're not going to go after the oil subsidies, but you're well taken, Mark. Thank you very much for making it. Pearson in Lamarck, Texas. Hey, Pearson, what's up?
Hey, theoretical.
Bad, huh?
Good Monday morning. Good Monday morning to you, theoretically, because everything is theory now, as you know, in day 22 of Trump Tsunami 2.0. So here's my concern. I know I can't be the only one out of the 150 million plus voting-age Americans who are thinking about this. And you guys touched on it just a few minutes ago. Here's my concern and my suggestion. When a judge, either across the road or across town or out of state, orders one of these yahoos to cease and desist or to destroy copies of sensitive data they made, you and I both know these people are lawless, reckless. They're going to just keep doing what they do. So unless there was someone there to physically enforce these orders, they're not going to do anything that we want them to do. We have to show up and physically make them. So, like you said, or like Obeidallah said, we've got to recruit lots of friendly law enforcement. We should have been doing it for years by now, because as you and I are witnessing, Donald Trump is getting rid of all the law enforcement who are not his guys. So that makes it a big challenge. Yeah. So we're going to have to recruit volunteers and swear them in, volunteer liberals who will go to these buildings and break in if necessary.
And to get a job, you have to sign an affidavit swearing under oath that you believe that January 6th was an inside job or 9/11 was an inside job or whatever, and that Trump had the election stolen from him in 2020. It's crazy.
I don't know why you're bringing that up. Well,
because that's the only way you can get a job right now with the Department of Justice. You've got to sign this form saying that Trump actually won in 2020. That you believe that to be the case. I don't think a lot of liberals would be willing to sign that. Although I get it, maybe they would go in undercover. But yeah, I get what you're saying, Pearson. I totally get it. Thank you very much. It's incredible what we're facing right now. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. It's the great revenge. Trump's Orwellian America is taking shape. The key to it was this insane executive order titled Ending the Weaponization of the Federal Government. And basically what it does is it sets up the weaponization of the federal government. It proclaims that the Biden administration was, using the Justice Department to go after Trump people and Republicans, and And it does it in a way that basically rationalizes they're doing the same thing. This is a absolute danger to our republic, this executive order and Trump's assertions around it. And you can read all about it. There's a whole op-ed about it titled "The Great Revenge, Trump's Orwellian America Takes Shape" over at HartmannReport.com. Get ready for the investigations, the arrests, and the show trials. HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
They built a machine fueled by fear. A whisper grows and it's all you hear. From every screen it feeds the fire, twisting truth to fuel desire. A mother's cry, a worker's loss, a calculated line they'll toss. They turn your pain into their gold. Selling grievance never gets old. The grievance machine, it's always on.
25 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, not too much, Tom. Look, I want to make a statement, but I got a question in there. Look, this, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm glad Donald Trump pulled Joe Biden's security clearance. And to be quite honest with you, I think...
Hang on just a second, Dave. Joe Biden never had a security clearance. Trump couldn't pull it. He did pull the security clearances for some of the people who work for Joe Biden or were around Joe Biden, but presidents don't have security clearances. Once they become president, for the rest of their lives, they have access to, now he might have denied him access to information, which is a different thing, but he's basically lying when he says he pulled the security clearance.
Okay, yeah, but for clearance, you have to need to know and the appropriate access. They denied his access, and Trump did. And to be quite honest with you, I think every president should be distancing themselves now, every former president, from Donald Trump, and I'll tell you why. But I'll just come right to the point. There was a line in a book about Lloyd Austin got a surprise call from Sergei Shoigu or maybe Gerasimov, probably Gerasimov, but it was sort of a surprise call, and Lloyd Austin, and it was a threat. I think it was about the Black Sea fleet that Elon Musk pulled the Starlink access to. And Lloyd Austin said, look, I lead the most powerful military in the world. I do not respond to threats. And Lloyd Austin verified that he made this comment. Look, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are up to some things that are obviously a charade, all right? They've been in communication ever since Donald Trump's first term. The Russians keep saying they are not going to the table unless the United States and the Ukraine make an offer because Russia is winning. Donald Trump needs to make a comment along the lines of Lloyd Austin. The question, we're in an interregnum period. What do you think the chances are that Donald Trump will do that?
I think zero. I think Trump is dancing to Putin's tune and has been dancing to Russia's tune for over 20 years. Dave, thanks for the call. 27 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And I'm guessing, Dave, as a former intelligence officer, that you would agree with that assessment. We'll be back with more of your calls right after this. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Settlers, the Mythology of the White Proletariat, the True Story of the White Nation by J. Sakai, published by Morningstar Press in 1989. This is from Chapter 2, The Foundations of Settler Life. The life of European settlers and the class structure of their society was abnormal because it was dependent upon a foundation of conquest, genocide, and enslavement. The myth of the self-sufficient white settler family clearing the wilderness and supporting themselves through their own initiative and hard labor is a propaganda fabrication. It is the absolute characteristic of settler society to be parasitic, dependent upon the super-exploitation of oppressed peoples for its style of life. Never has Euro-American society completely supported itself. This is the decisive factor in the consciousness of all classes and strata of white society from 1600 to now. Settler society was raised up above the level of backward old Europe by a foundation of conquest. This conquest was a miracle drug for a Europe convulsed with the reaction of decaying feudalism and deadly capitalism. Shot into the veins of the Spanish feudal nation, for instance, the miracle drug of the New World conquest gave Spain the momentary power to overrun North Africa, Holland, and Italy before her historical incident waned. Like many such fixes for Euro-Americans, this conquest was addicting. It was habit-forming and rapidly indispensable, not only culturally, but in the mechanism of an oppressor society whose lifeblood was new conquest. We'll examine this later in the relationship of settlerism to imperialism. For now, it's enough to see that this conquest is a material act of great magnitude, an economic and social event as important as the emergence of the factory system or the exploitation of petroleum in the Middle East. We stress the obvious here because the Euro-American settlers have always made light of their invasion and occupation, although the conquered territory is the precondition for their whole society. Traditionally, European settler societies throw off the propaganda smoke screens that they didn't really conquer and dispossess other nations. They claim with false modesty that they merely moved into vacant territory. So the early English settlers depicted America as empty, a howling wilderness, unsettled, sparsely populated, just waiting with a vacant sign on the door for the first lucky civilization to walk in and claim it. Theodore Roosevelt wrote defensively in 1900, quote, "The settler and pioneer have at bottom had justice on their side. This great continent could not have been kept as nothing but a game preserve for squalid savages," end of quote. It is telling that this lie is precisely the same lie put forward by white Afrikaner settlers who claim that South Africa was literally totally uninhabited by any Africans when they arrived from Europe. To universal derision, these European settlers claim to be the only rightful historic inhabitants of South Africa. Or we can hear similar defenses put forward by the European settlers of Israel, who claim that much of the Palestinian land and buildings they occupy are rightfully theirs, since the Arabs had allegedly decided to voluntarily abandon it all during the 1948-49 war. Are these kinds of tales any less preposterous than those put forward by Euro-American settlers? America was spacious and sparsely populated only because the European invaders destroyed whole civilizations and killed off millions of Native Americans to get the land and profits they wanted. We all know that when the English arrived at Virginia, for example, they encountered an urban, village-dwelling society far more skilled than they were in the arts of medicine, agriculture, fishing, and government. This civilization was reflected in a chain of 300 Indian nations and peoples stretching from the Arctic Circle to the tip of South America, many of whom had highly developed societies. There was, in fact, a greater population in these Indian nations in 1492 than in all of Western Europe. Recent scholarly estimates indicate that at the time of Columbus, there were 100 million Indians in the hemisphere, 10 million in North America, 25 million in Central Mexico, and an additional 65 million elsewhere in Central and South America. These numbers have long been concealed since they give rise to the logical question of what happened to this great mass of people. The European invaders, Spanish, Dutch, English, Portuguese, and French, simply killed off millions and millions to safeguard their conquest of the land and provide the disposable slave labor they needed to launch their new world. Conservative Western historical estimates show that the Spanish reduced, in quotes, the Indian population of their colonies from some 50 million to only 4 million by the end of the 17th century. And from the 10 million Indians who once inhabited North America, after 4 centuries of settler invasion and rule, there were 1,900, perhaps 200,000 to 300,000 surviving descendants in the United States. This was the very substantial down payment towards the continuing blood price that third world nations have to pay to sustain the Euro-American way of life. So when we hear that the settlers pushed out the Indians or forced the Indians to leave their traditional hunting grounds, we know that these are just code phrases to refer politely to the most barbaric genocide imaginable. It could well be the greatest crime in all of human history. Only here, the Adolf Eichmanns and Heinrich Himmlers had names like Benjamin Franklin and Andrew Jackson. It is that genocide was not an accident, not an excess, not the unintended side effect of virile European growth. Genocide was the necessary and deliberate act of the capitalists and their settler shock troops. The book Settlers. Share the Thom Hartmann program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. Did you know that the ancient Roman Republic, which for 480 years was actually a democratic republic before Julius Caesar kind of ended the democracy phase and replaced it with the autocracy phase, that they were brought down by a very small group of very rich people. The richest man in ancient Rome was Marcus Licinius Crassus. He was the richest guy, the billionaire of Rome. And he frankly hated the Roman free bread for all welfare system. It was being paid for with his tax dollars, after all. So him and Pompey the Great and a few other rich guys got together, and they basically crashed Rome. They turned it into an oligarchy and then into a tyranny. And the parallels to what Trump is doing right now are absolutely shocking. There's an article about it over at HartmannReport.com titled "American Caesar: Trump's Path to Power Mirrors Rome's Darkest Days." Check it out.
We turned our backs on what we need, chased the glitter, fed the greed. From Reagan's rise to Trump's parade, a billionaire kingdom we've remade. Free healthcare, it's just a dream, while yachts glide down a golden stream. We chose the few, forgot the rest, built this empire of excess. America chose wealth over well-being, blind to the pain its people are seeing. The homeless freeze, the hungry cry, while billionaires build towers in the sky. Oh, America, when will you see this gilded cage is not the land of the free?
36 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Don in Denver. Hey, Don, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing today?
Fine, thank you. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm a retired HSI agent, Homeland Security Investigations. My last posting was in the Office of Professional Responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
All this talk of people impersonating ICE agents and other possible misconduct really needs to be reported.
Yeah, 3 arrests so far. There's probably, it's like rats. You see one, count 10.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of folks who really just don't know how to do it and are just really intimidated. They don't know how to report.
Yeah.
But whenever they're stopped, they need to start gathering evidence of the stop, such as recording the conversation and also trying to take pictures as they can.
Yep.
There's somebody else there. If they can take pictures, ultimately, it may help root out some of these miscreants, whether they're impersonating or they're just agents going off the rail. So how they can report it is there's a phone number to the ICE Integrity Cooperation Center, and that number is 833-4-ICE-OPR. So what will happen is after they make the report, they'll be contacted by somebody either from the Homeland Security Inspector General or ICE OPR, and they'll come out and talk to them. Either they come out physically or they'll call them on the phone and probably invite them into some kind of interview. And if they can present the information and hopefully again some action be taken to get these guys off the street.
Yeah, there you go. Don, thanks for that. Thank you, from a position of authority, thank you for sharing that information with us. I appreciate it. Joe in Atlanta. Hey, Joe. Thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. How you doing, sir?
So far, so good. What's up?
I hear you. Well, I was listening to I listened to C-SPAN last Friday. There's a press conference with the Japanese Prime Minister, and he talked about a $1 trillion investment in the U.S., part of it through not the acquisition of U.S. Steel, but like an investment in it, and others. And then the other part was about buying an export of LNG, from the U.S. to Japan, and apparently they weren't able. I think it was because we weren't promoting LNG exports during the last administration. I'm just trying to figure out, if Trump said I wouldn't believe it, but when the Prime Minister of Japan has talked about this, I'm just wondering how this is bad for us, because I'm sure it is. I just don't know how.
Well, when foreign entities own American corporations, or own large of stock, the American entities go offshore. I mean, that's where the dividends go, right? So number one. Number two, the governance of those corporations, if the foreign entities own large shares of stock, can be disrupted or altered in ways that might not work to the benefit of America. So that's where the investment in U.S. steel, makes you scratch your head. What was the other point that you mentioned?
The other part was, Japan has been wanting to become a big exporter of LNG gas.
Yeah.
And then
they don't want to export. They don't have
any
LNG, do they? They want to import.
No, they don't. But I said export. I meant us exporting, them importing,
right.
and that was a big part of the conversation. Of the press conference with the Prime Minister. Of course, it's through an interpreter. So you only.
Yeah, no, if my memory serves me right, during the last Trump administration, there was an effort to build some LNG, some major LNG terminals, I guess they call them, along the West Coast. In fact, I think some of them were up here in the Pacific Northwest. And I believe that got stopped or blocked or shut down by the Biden administration as part of their effort to reduce, our carbon footprint in the world. Wouldn't surprise me at all if Trump turns all that back on.
Yeah, and like I said, I understand that makes sense about the large, if they own a large, vast amount of U.S. company stocks, they can help kind of direct in some of the things we do. The LNG thing, I understand we want to get off of fossil fuels. I understand that, but it's not happening today. So I'm just curious how that would hurt the U.S. economy if we allow that to open back up.
It only hurts the U.S. economy in the context of massive wildfires in California and Hawaii, huge floods across the southeastern states, hurricanes that are hitting force levels that literally we've never seen on Earth before, across Texas and across Florida and whatnot. We've got to do something about climate change here, Joe. But other than that, yeah, it's more profit for American fossil fuel producers, and American fossil fuel producers are huge funders of the Republican Party. So I'm like I said, I'm guessing that Trump will reinstate this. He doesn't. He's not going to be alive to see the worst of the consequences of global warming. Joe, thanks for the call. Maureen in Buffalo, New York. Hey, Maureen, what's on your mind today?
Hi. I don't even know how to articulate this well, but I was just thinking about how I just saw the leak of Trudeau telling people that it was an actual threat that the United States actually did want to take Canada and make it a 51st state.
Yeah,
I was just wondering. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just wondering, how that would affect us, because I was thinking, that could potentially push Canada into to ally with China, and that's concerning to me. And also, I was just thinking about the BRICS, because I know China is on its way to be how the United States is, and if the BRICS take over and Canada goes with them, I don't even know how to really articulate that, but how would that affect the U.S.,
Yeah, Canada, Canada is a fairly substantial country. Physically, it's huge. Its population is about 1/10 of the United States, I think about 12%. But they do need to import a number of things, and they do need to export a number of things to keep their economy going. And the principal exports are wood and oil, or fossil fuels. And my guess is if they decided to cut off trade with the United States, and there's certainly talk about it, that they would probably increase trade with Europe rather than China. But, they already have a very healthy trade with China, just like we do. You walk into Canadian stores and you find all kinds of Chinese junk, cheap Chinese stuff, clothing and everything else there. I just can't imagine that Canada's a pretty liberal nation. Even the conservatives there, want to keep their healthcare system intact and their social security system and things like that. So I'm not so worried about that. What I am concerned about is that if we sufficiently piss off Canada and Mexico, that A, we're shooting ourselves in the foot economically but B, in terms of national security, we're hurting ourselves. These are longtime allies who have literally fought with us in multiple wars, and we don't want that to happen. So those are my concerns, Maureen. I can't imagine even the conservative, I forget his name, who's running against Chrystia Freeland for the premiership of Canada, or prime ministership, or whatever they call it there, wanting to form an alliance with China. I get your concern, but I think that's probably not on their bingo card. Maureen, thanks for the call. That was a great question. Thank you so much. It's 44 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Speaking the truths the Trump administration would really rather you didn't know. I'll be right back with your call. Michelle in Kansas City, Missouri. Hey, Michelle, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I'm actually at the Lake of the Ozarks, my lake house. And, you get up in the morning, you do your thing, you call your constitutional people. I called Josh Hawley's office this morning on my cell phone, which has an 816 area code. Mm-hmm. It rang and rang, sent me to voicemail. So
is
I hung
816
up.
Missouri, Michelle?
Yes,
Okay.
816 Kansas City, Missouri,
Okay.
specifically.
All right. Pardon my interrupting.
And, well, please don't do that again, Tom. It's your show.
Keep going.
So then I looked up, I'm like, I have my landline here at the lake. Mm-hmm. So I picked up my landline, which is a rural Missouri zip area code, 660. They picked up in 3 rings.
Really? So if you call from a red area, they answer the phone. If you call from a blue area, they don't?
I think, well, I'm pretty sure. And the guy was quite shocked when I told him, don't vote for, confirm these people, excuse me. And he goes, oh, well, I thought you were calling from Benton County. I'm like, well, I am calling from Benton County, but I just thought it was odd that they didn't answer the 816 Kansas City area code, but they quickly picked up on the rural Missouri
That's interesting.
area code. So
that's very
just saying, Tom.
Yeah.
I think they have a little white privilege out here.
Yeah, and a little white supremacy problem going on. Michelle.
Oh, well, we won't even tell you about the Trump flag being flown above the American flag.
Oh, geez.
Right next to the post office, and how I had to go through a timber tantrum and explain that was wrong.
I get it. Michelle, thanks for sharing that story with us. That was a great one.
Thank you, Tom.
That's an amazing data point. Thank you so much. Larry in Los Angeles. Hey, Larry, what's on your mind today?
Thank you for taking my call, Tom. The first 9 minutes of your program got cut off out here, and those of us in Los Angeles, we just missed it. So I'm wondering
what ran in instead.
Well, I hate to say it, but fundraising.
Oh, well, that's okay. If they're going to cut us off for fundraising, I don't have a problem with it. The first 5 minutes, of the top of the hour is just a book report anyway. And in fact, I've recorded some fundraisers for them. But what your question was, what was I ranting about?
Yeah, could you just hit the high points so we can get that back on the record?
My big concern is that it looks like Trump, and J.D. Vance is advocating this on Twitter, it looks like Trump is going to start ignoring court orders. And if he does that, that's kind of the end of our constitutional order. That is the official breaking of the American Republic, when the executive branch says we're not going to pay attention to the judicial branch. Now, it's been done before. It was done by Abraham Lincoln and it was done by Andrew Jackson, but in very, very limited cases, in a very, very small way. I mean, Andrew Jackson did the Trail of Tears anyway, even though the court said it was unconstitutional, and Abe Lincoln refused to enforce Dred Scott, which, the Civil War proved was the right decision. But what Trump is talking about doing is basically turning America into Russia. And that's a very different thing. You can read the whole thing, Larry, over at HartmannReport.com. It's free. It's right up at the top of the page right now. Larry, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Appreciate it. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Well, it's the brand new Confederate States of America, plantation politics. You know, the old Confederate States, today known as MAGA America, the new Confederate States, were devoted to making America as white as possible, stripping women and minorities of political and economic power, gutting workers' rights, rigging election outcomes, their leaders nakedly taking bribes, using the phony veneer of Christianity to justify brutal policies, including slavery, making queer people invisible, reconfiguring schools for indoctrination, having their militias terrorize minorities and their opponents, and maintaining a government of, by, and for rich white men. And these are the principles, the core principles around which the modern-day GOP has reorganized itself. You can find an entire article about this that lays the whole thing out over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled "The Plantation Politics of MAGA America. Is This the Future We Want?" Check it out.
Roses are red, the markets are blue. Elon said take over, I said we're through. Trump sent a tweet, thought he could woo. But baby, I know a scam when it's new. You promised me Mars, a moonlit escape, but all that I got was a tax cut reshaped. You ghosted your workers, you left them to fight, then flew off in rockets. Boy, that ain't right. Billionaires ain't my Valentine. They steal my heart, then privatize. Break my union, sell me lies. Swipe my rights like NFTs. Goodbye. Turns out you meant no wages, no heat. You call it disruption, you call it elite, but I call it conning the folks in the street. You sent me a card, said trickle down, but all that trickled was jobs out of town. Musk keeps on flirting with censorship glee, like love from a chatbot, it ain't fooling me.
52 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. A Valentine's Day card to Elon. Indeed. Thomas in Toledo, Ohio. Hey, Thomas, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom.
Hey.
Glad to be on the air here. I have a concern and a comment. My comment is I'm a retired firefighter from Toledo, Ohio, 28 years. And I listen to the representatives, both the Senate and the congressional people, and they have no passion behind their speeches and what they're trying to do, and they're kind of boring and they're duds, because I can remember Jon Stewart was trying to fight for health care in the Senate and in the congressional hearings, because they were going to stop it for the people that worked on 911 or were part of 911. And he got up there before the committees and stuff to tell them to do your job. And nobody in the Democratic Party that I listen to has that type of enthusiasm and passion to say, do your job.
Yeah.
And don't let this happen.
I get it, Thomas. We have some we have a deficit in the Democratic Party of leadership right now, and of charisma. And, I'm hoping that this gets fixed over time, and I'm hoping more Democrats will step up. I do understand that, there are a number of Democrats who might be very charismatic and might be willing to speak out, but they are afraid, just like the Republicans are, that if they speak out against Trump and Musk, that Musk will throw $20, $30, $50 million into the next election and wipe them out even, before they get to the election by wiping them out in the primary. And and this is the result of 5 corrupt Republicans on the Supreme Court legalizing political bribery, with Citizens United. But, so the only people who are speaking out loudly are people who are in absolutely safe districts like AOC and Jamie Raskin. But I am hopeful that more of them will grow a spine and start speaking out. I know obviously you are. I think that's a broad sentiment across the country. Thomas, thanks for the call. Ann in Trinity, Florida. Hey, Ann, thanks for listening to WMNF. What's up?
Hey, Tom. I was calling because I wanted to speak a little bit about blackmail. I have paid attention to politics. I guess I kind of started getting involved towards the end of the Clinton administration, the election with Gore. And I'm a C-SPAN junkie, like a previous caller, and would watch Tom DeLay and Dick Armey and Trent Lott. And I always felt like, wow, the Democrats, it's like you're trying to herd them as cats to get them to kind of vote in unison. The Republicans can always make their guys vote lockstep with them.
Yeah.
And I felt like, when Army and DeLay kind of let, the Tea Party kind of took over, and I think that maybe they lost some of that grip that they had. But I think that they've picked that back up. I think, they got into the RNC's emails as they did the DNC's. They didn't release the RNC's. So
they being Russia, is that what you're talking about now?
Yes, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I think Russia got it, but of course I would think that they would have handed out anything compromising to Trump that he could hold over any of, our people or any of Trump's people.
Right.
But I just kind of felt like, if I just feel, and I would think it was Representative Burkett. I think he's maybe Tennessee or somewhere in the South. But he acknowledged, I want to say it was last fall, that before they go to vote, they've got somebody that walks up to them and will tell them if they're not planning on voting in the way they want them to, there's something on you or maybe your wife or your daughter or something, a family member.
Or just we're going to drop $40 million in a primary challenge and you'll be toast.
That too. I think, though, if we could find out, some of our investigative journalists could find out, because I think that some of the stuff is probably just, maybe people having affairs and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I think if we could expose, investigative journalists can expose some of those things, then we might be able to take away some of the hold that they have maybe over some members.
Yeah, I remember it was Tim Burchett, right, when he came out and said that, some of the people and some of the Republicans were being blackmailed. That was, we talked about that on the air when that happened. I haven't seen any follow-up to that. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Ann. This is something that ProPublica or, one of the good investigative, Raw Story, one of the good investigative journalism sites should definitely be going after. Ann, thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate it. That's hopefully somebody who can do something about it heard you. Appreciate the call. We'll be back on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
fight back!
University Book Club is Trump U, Promises, Lies, and Corruption, My Battle with Donald Trump's Fake University by Art Cohen with Dan Good. This is from Chapter 1, The Art and the Deal. I was in a vulnerable place. I found myself jobless in early 2009 after my consumer electronics company went through a forced sale. I'd poured my life into Ariel Inc. You might remember our Audio Bug FM transmitters, ladybug-shaped devices that aired music from portable devices over a car radio. After Apple's iPod became all the rage, we developed, manufactured, and licensed products for major retailers and brands such as Best Buy's Dynex, Irriver, Kensington, SanDisk, XM Radio, and Delphi. Later, we looked to expand our wireless music transmission offerings with our own i21 brand, working seamlessly with the debut in 2007 of a new iPhone. Everything was going well until it wasn't. The consumer electronics industry was hit hard by the 2008 recession. Our major investor wanted to restructure the company and install new management. I was out as CEO in 2009. I wanted to find something new and fast. It wasn't a great time to be unemployed. The national economy was tanking, and to top it off, Silicon Valley isn't a cheap place to live. I worried about providing for my wife and 2 sons. At age 44, I found myself at a crossroads, an inflection point in my career. After spending 5 years as a CEO, I wanted to do something different and carve a new path. And then I came across a special invitation in the mail and a full-page ad in the San Jose Mercury News promoting an opportunity. Do you think you can profit in this market? You can, and I'll show you how, proclaimed the advertiser's headline underneath a photo of real estate developer Donald Trump. The ad promised the opportunity to learn from Donald Trump's hand-picked experts. He's the most celebrated entrepreneur on earth. He's earned more in a day than most people do in a lifetime. He's living a life many men and women only dream about, and now he's ready to share with Americans like you the Trump process for investing in today's once-in-a-lifetime real estate market. Come to this free introductory class, and you'll learn from Donald Trump's hand-picked instructors a systematic method for investing in real estate that anyone can use effectively. You'll learn foreclosure investing from the inside out. You'll learn how to finance your deals using other people's money. You'll learn how to overcome your fear of getting started. End quote. The ad featured a guarantee attributed to the man himself. I can turn anyone into a successful real estate investor, including you. So, why not me? Donald Trump was a name I trusted. I grew up in Philadelphia, less than 100 miles from Trump's home base, New York City, so I was familiar with his success as a real estate developer and as an author of the 1987 bestseller, The Art of the Deal. I'd made the hour-long drive to Atlantic City, New Jersey a couple times, and his last name was splashed across the casinos, T-R-U-M-P, and flashing lights. I consider the name Trump synonymous with success and wealth. At least that's what it meant for me back then. During the mid-'80s, while a student at Drexel University, I was one of the co-founding members of the D-Users, widely acknowledged as the first Macintosh users group. I was invited to a Hollywood-style event called Going National, hosted by Drexel on its campus. There, I met the legendary Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple. His inspiring talk that day imagined future computers using artificial intelligence to have conversations with the dead. Not literally, but using inputs known about, for example, Abraham Lincoln. The AI would bring Lincoln to life so you could have a modern-day conversation with him as if he were alive today. Jobs' talk inspired me to lead a team tasked during a competition with imagining the personal computer of the year 2000. There we were, to present our vision with an impressive panel. Science fiction writer Ray Bradbury, futurist Alvin Toffler, education writer and historian Diane Ravitch, computer pioneer Alan Kay, and Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak. A team from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign won the competition. They envisioned a tablet device that sounded an awful lot like the eventual iPad. During a luncheon, I got to sit at a table with Bradbury, and we began talking. He was amiable. He told me how his writing career didn't take off right away. He kept at it, day by day, year by year, and eventually success and fame found him. I love science fiction, and Fahrenheit 451 is one of my favorite books. Besides my father, Bradbury probably inspired me more than anyone else as a writer, something I enjoy doing in my spare time. The Project 2000 contest was beneficial in another way. It allowed me to connect with Apple employees and give them my resume. By 1989, I was moving to California as an Apple employee. I worked as an engineer at Apple until the mid-90s, during the time before Steve Jobs returned to the company. I left to join a company called General Magic, where I worked on product and project management. During my time there, I bumped into a French-born computer programmer who said his wife came up with an idea about selling stuff from around the house online. Everybody laughed about it. I guess Pierre Omidyar got the last laugh. His creation, Auction Web, was later renamed eBay and became one of the world's leading e-commerce companies. I bounced around several tech companies in Silicon Valley, including Coraco, Oracle, and Philips Semiconductors. At one point, I tried my hand at law school, taking classes at night. Philips was picking up the tab. Classes were challenging and my head wasn't in it. It was a big commitment, and I ended up only going for a year. My passion remained with high tech. After moving to California, I didn't keep close tabs on Donald Trump. I wasn't aware of his casino empire cratering or his massive, massive debt. The book is Trump U by Art Cohen with Dan Good.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, what we were talking about in the first hour, you know, Trump breaking our government by refusing to go along with court orders, that moment of truth is upon us. Just breaking news here, U.S. District Judge John McConnell, just minutes ago, issued an order directing the Trump administration to immediately obey a previous restraining order halting the funding freeze at the National Institutes of Health and two other Biden-era laws. This is back on Friday. 22 state attorneys general, all Democrats, had accused the administration of not obeying Judge McConnell's order to unfreeze federal spending for grants and loans. And the White House OMB said that the order did not apply to specific federal programs. So McConnell says, yes, it does. His 5-page order says, and I quote, "The broad, categorical, and sweeping freeze of federal funds is, as this court found, likely unconstitutional and has caused and continues to cause irreparable harm to a vast portion of this country. Therefore, McConnell has ordered the Office of Management and Budget," this is Russell Vought's agency now, the architect of Project 2025, to, quote, "take every step necessary," end quote, "to restore funding for the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Improvement and Jobs Act, the National Institutes of Health, and other agencies covered by the restraining order." In other words, Congress said you're going to spend this money. Damn it, you're going to spend this money. Now we find out, is Trump going to openly defy a federal court? Now, my guess is he'll appeal it. And the appeals court, you know, if he does it with a right-wing appeals court, and I don't know how much discretion he has in picking jurisdictions at this point, but if he appeals it, he may, you know, get that order stayed or maybe not. But we're into the last part of the third quarter, the first part of the fourth quarter here, to use a metaphor from yesterday. Wasn't that a bizarre football game? I'm reading all over the internet that Mahomes, you know, the quarterback for the Chiefs, that he was photographed with Trump, his family is with Trump, his wife has been tweeting how wonderful Trump is, and that this is the Trump curse, that if Trump likes you, you're screwed. So who knows? But I digress. Anyhow, we'll see where this goes. Meanwhile, David Jolly, the former Republican congressman from Florida, was on MSNBC over the weekend, and he says the biggest problem coming is that the government funding cliff is coming. The Republicans are going, the Democrats are talking about, and I think they're quite serious about this, about just standing back and letting Republicans deal with the budget. On March 14th, I believe, double check, but my recollection is it's March 14th. On that day, the federal government runs out of money or begins the process of running out of money because the money for this fiscal year has not been appropriated. And so we're running off leftover money from last fiscal year. The fiscal year begins in September. And, it begins in October 1st. And the previous fiscal year ends at the end of September. And so if there's not enough money to fund the government, it starts shutting down functions. Well, some of that money is being saved by Elon Musk shutting down functions anyway. And we know that the Republicans in the Senate are planning on another multi-trillion-dollar tax break for the billionaires who own them. And that the Republicans in the House want to do that. They want to have another billion-dollar tax break or trillion-dollar tax break for the billionaires who own them. But there are conflicting currents, shall we say, within the House GOP. Now, the Senate, the Republicans in the Senate, they've got a three-vote majority. In the House, including, the vice president. In the House, they technically have a three-vote majority. It's more like a 1 or 2 vote majority, given that there's these 3, seats that are up for special elections here. So whether they're going to be able to even put this thing together without Democratic help is a huge question. And in fact, the best bets are they won't. So David Jolly says they don't even know how to solve this problem. He says the Republican Congress has collapsed. He calls them listless and meaningless. He said the immediate ability to rush to the fire is the Congress, and they've just laid down. And I think he's right, and in part, this is because the right-wing billionaires who fund them, particularly the fossil fuel billionaires, they don't believe in the federal government. They don't like the federal government. They don't want the federal government to be like it is. They're all down with David Koch's 1980 platform that called for basically every function of the federal government except police and military and the judges to be shut down. Why should billionaires have to pay for stuff that billionaires don't use? Billionaires don't use our public roads. They don't use they don't use our parks. They've got their, they've got their super yachts and their mansions and their Swiss chalets and their private jets. They don't use our airports. They don't use our, arguably they use our air traffic system, but, they don't care if it collapses for commercial flights. And I suppose they can always fly VFR and not even have to bother with air traffic control, at least on a nice day. Or if they're going to ignore the rules, just punch through some clouds, at 400 miles an hour. So this is going to get real interesting, real fast. The next 2 months, I think, are going to determine an awful lot about what kind of government, what form of government we're going to end up with. Whether Trump is going to be successful in turning us into Russia, cracking down on the press, cracking down on dissent, or whether he's going to have to back down. And it's largely going to depend on what Republicans in the House and Senate do, which is why it's so important that if you live in a red state, that you call your Republican members of the House and Senate and let them know what you're thinking. And don't do it like, hey, I'm a liberal and I'm pissed off. Do it like, this isn't conservative. This isn't what Barry Goldwater would have done. This isn't even what Richard Nixon would have done. This is destroying the American government. Why aren't you doing something about this? Senator Thune or Senator Tillis or Senator, fill in the blanks, right, depending on where you live. Meanwhile, John Quealy, the publisher of Common Dreams, wrote a great piece that's over on commondreams.org right now. It's titled, "The More Sinister Reason Behind Musk's Attack on the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau," the consumer agency. Russell Vogt, who is, his new head of OMB, the architect of Project 2025, just ordered the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau to shut down their operations. Now, the only thing that the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau does is protect consumers. They have recovered over $20 billion that has been stolen from people like you and me by giant banks and financial institutions. All of it through fraudulent practices, hitting you with fines and penalties that you really don't have to pay, running sneaky promotions that are filled with lies. I mean, this is the kind of stuff the CFPB does, is they stop those kind of things from happening. And they then reclaim your money and give it back to you. Now, why would Russell Vought and Donald Trump want to shut that down? And Elon Musk, for that matter. Could it be that Elon Musk just cut a deal with Visa and wants to start processing payments through X? He wants to basically turn X into something like Venmo, maybe? And he doesn't want the CFPB looking over his shoulder? Is that what's going on? Or is it that the big banks have come to Russell Vought and to Donald Trump and their friends and said, hey, we'll give you millions more in campaign contributions if you just get these damn regulators off our backs so we can go back to screwing our customers? I can't think of any other reason than those two. Can you? The CFPB, by the way, is not funded by Congress. It's funded by the Fed. And Vought and Trump ordered the Fed to zero out next year's appropriation. In other words, shut the damn thing down. And again, the reason why it's funded by the Fed rather than Congress is to prevent political interference, which is exactly what's going on right now. Elizabeth Warren came out and she said, Russell Vought is giving big banks and giant corporations the green light to scam families. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has returned over $21 billion to families cheated by Wall Street. Republicans have failed to gut it in Congress and the courts. They will fail again. And then on Friday, Musk posted CFPB RIP on his Nazi-infested website, social media site. And on MSNBC, the executive director of the Groundwork Collective, Lindsay Owen, said Musk's motivations are likely more sinister and closer to home. She said, we know that Elon Musk is interested in starting his own payment app. He's partnered with Visa to do that. And so he has a real interest in ensuring that the CFPB isn't blocking an effort like that. And according to David Dayen, quote, by stalling designation of non-depository institutions, Bessent, this is the Treasury Secretary, ensures that X will not be designated for CFPB supervision, at least in the near term. But the insertive directive specifically bars designation of non-banks. Well, it's a little technical, but basically what it says is that Elon Musk can't be regulated by the CFPB, that they're going to have to figure out some other way to do it. At least this is their plan. This is what they're trying to do. Again, all the Consumer Protection Bureau does is protect consumers. It doesn't work on behalf of billionaires. It doesn't work on behalf of banks. It works on behalf of you, of people like you and me who have our money with our, with banks and credit unions and investment houses. That's all it does. Why do they want to get rid of it? What say you?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Oh, and if you like the fires in Los Angeles, you're going to love what comes next. I'll tell you about that right after the break. And then I'll pick up the call stations. And welcome back. Ken in Everett, Washington. Hey, thanks for listening to the Thom Hartmann app. What's up?
Yes, hi. I'm calling. This is Ken, the counselor, and I called last time, and because I felt like we need a pep talk, and I think we need one again. I'm like most people, progressives. I'm depressed and anxious, and the last time we talked about, and I think you and I agreed that the most potent things that we can do as individuals is when we're feeling scared or depressed or frozen is to take action. And so today I think I'd like to touch on something I'd like to share that I found helpful, my clients have found helpful, and to take this going into action to make it easier. And one thing I think that the secret really is to do one small thing and make it really small. Sometimes I'll just take an aspirin, or not an aspirin, but a multivitamin, or maybe take a walk, or maybe just do some other kind of exercise, or solve a small problem, and
or help somebody out.
Help somebody out. That's even better. Once we do something, I love what you just said. Yeah, that's even more effective because they feel good and we feel good, so it's a twofer. And I think, we all know that everything is related to everything else. And so the beauty is that if you have a number of things that you do, like vitamins, multivitamin, or eat a nice big salad, or go for a walk, whatever it is, one thing tends to lead to another.
Yeah.
When you go take a walk, we know it gets the fluids moving and everything. We feel better, and so once we feel better, we kind of want to keep it going.
Yeah, no, I get it, and I would add that calling your members of Congress or just raising hell can also make you feel good. I think you're absolutely right, Ken. The best remedy for non-biological depression is action. Thank you, Diane in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hey, Diane, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I was thinking, what created this whole problem is the Supreme Court.
I agree.
Citizens United.
Yep.
And then Trump v. USA is in 23 when they gave him unlimited power, they decided. Yeah. And, they created the monster, then they fed the monster. Well, maybe it's time to reel the monster in. And didn't it say there was a clause or an attachment in there that they would review what's taken to them that maybe Trump does case by case?
Yes. When they gave him immunity from prosecution, they basically said, but it has to run through us.
Right. So don't you think it's time we run it by the Supreme Court? And,
it'll get there.
Maybe
it'll get there.
Say this is over the top.
I'm wondering, the Supreme Court adjudicates disputes between the legislative and executive branch, and I get it that individual members of Congress supposedly don't have standing to sue, but I would think that they would have standing to sue at the Supreme Court. This is something I'm not an attorney, so I'm not certain of. But yeah. Diane, thank you for the call. Spot on. We need to, and the big question is the Supreme Court going to go along with the destruction of American democracy? I'm concerned that they will. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So Richard Nixon was a crook, but not a lot of Americans knew that in 1960. But he lost to John Kennedy, not because he was a crook, but because he didn't know how to use television. He refused to wear makeup during the debates. Jack Kennedy understood television, and it was why he was so, widely popular. Calvin Coolidge was the first president to use radio in 1923, but Franklin Roosevelt did his fireside chats starting in 1933, just after he was inaugurated, and they were often listened to by a third of Americans. That's why he got reelected 3 times. He was elected 4 times to president. If Joe Biden had done the same thing during his 4 years, reaching all the American people every week, using social media, the new media, because that was radio and television back in the day, he would be in the White House right now, or Kamala Harris. There's a whole article about this, how Democrats need to get with the plan. They need to figure out how to use social media and get some charismatic candidates out there. Over at HartmannReport.com is titled Democrats' Fatal Flaw. Check it out.
In the shadows they gather near, waving flags, stoking fear. A storm brews dark, a bitter fight, marching forward into the night.
Putin, Modi, Duterte's call, strongmen rise, and democracies fall. Trump's armies
with faces unseen, a dangerous play in the American dream. The rise of Trump's thugs, fueled by hate, breaking the doors of a fragile state. From Proud Boys to 3%, their rage burns bright, their purpose bent. Brown shirts, black shirts, history's mark, echoed now in the fiery dark, armed and ready. A nation's divide, violence justified by a leader's pride. The wolves run wild, in packs they roam, turning streets to a battleground home. Liberty crushed beneath their boots, a chilling return to history's roots. The rise of Trump's thugs, fueled by hate, breaking the doors of a fragile state. From Proud Boys to 3%, their rage burns bright, their purpose.
Welcome back. 24 minutes past the hour. So Trump has put into place a hiring freeze for federal officials. In fact, not just a hiring freeze. They sent a letter out to all 2 million federal employees saying, hey, wouldn't you like to resign right now? We'll pay you through September if you do. Although, you know, there's no contract, there's no proof. In fact, it looks like at least some people have resigned and then been told, sorry, we're not going to pay you. So be careful and talk to your union if you're a federal employee. But here's where it gets wild. You ever heard of federal firefighters? Now, I confess, I didn't even realize there were federal firefighters until you know, this last week. But there are, and the Department of the Interior last year employed 5,780, and the U.S. Forest Service employed 11,300 federal firefighters. Now, the problem is that these people are seasonal employees. They don't work during the winter. So, you know, they get laid off and then they get rehired. It's not like they're on vacation. They're unemployed right now, and they would be being hired right about now to get ready for the fire season, which, you know, begins in May and June. And they can't be hired right now because Trump has put this federal hiring freeze into place. So, like I said, if you liked the fires in Los Angeles and Hawaii, you're going to love what comes next. Because, you know, we're talking almost 20,000 firefighters who can travel anywhere in the country. I mean, this is their job, is to backstop local firefighters, state firefighters, county and municipal firefighters in these horrible situations, like, you know, the Palisades fire or the one in Hawaii. And these are not, I mean, those are the big ones, right? But there's smaller ones all over the country, and these federal firefighters show up, and they're not just on the ground with axes and hoses. They're flying federal planes, tanker planes that are dumping fire retardant on forests, you know, to stop or prevent forest fires. And Trump has shut that thing down. I wonder how people in the red states that have fire problems, you know, Wyoming, Montana, I wonder how they're feeling about this. So what's on your mind? I'll pick up your calls on the other side of this break. Stick around. It's 27 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back with your calls. University Book Club is Trump U, Promises, Lies, and Corruption, My Battle with Donald Trump's Fake University by Art Cohen with Dan Good. This is from Chapter 1, The Art and the Deal. I was in a vulnerable place. I found myself jobless in early 2009 after my consumer electronics company went through a forced sale. I'd poured my life into Ariel Inc. You might remember our Audio Bug FM transmitters, ladybug-shaped devices that aired music from portable devices over a car radio. After Apple's iPod became all the rage, we developed, manufactured, and licensed products for major retailers and brands such as Best Buy's Dynex, Iriver, Kensington, SanDisk, XM Radio, and Delphi. Later, we looked to expand our wireless music transmission offerings with our own i21 brand, working seamlessly with the debut in 2007 of a new iPhone. Everything was going well until it wasn't. The consumer electronics industry was hit hard by the 2008 recession. Our major investor wanted to restructure the company and install new management. I was out as CEO in 2009. I wanted to find something new and fast. It wasn't a great time to be unemployed. The national economy was tanking, and to top it off, Silicon Valley isn't a cheap place to live. I worried about providing for my wife and 2 sons. At age 44, I found myself at a crossroads, an inflection point in my career. After spending 5 years as a CEO, I wanted to do something different and carve a new path. And then I came across a special invitation in the mail and a full-page ad in the San Jose Mercury News promoting an opportunity. Do you think you can profit in this market? You can, and I'll show you how, proclaimed the advertiser's headline underneath a photo of real estate developer Donald Trump. The ad promised the opportunity to learn from Donald Trump's hand-picked experts. He's the most celebrated entrepreneur on earth. He's earned more in a day than most people do in a lifetime. He's living a life many men and women only dream about, and now he's ready to share with Americans like you the Trump process for investing in today's once-in-a-lifetime real estate market. Come to this free introductory class, and you'll learn from Donald Trump's hand-picked instructors a systematic method for investing in real estate that anyone can use effectively. You'll learn foreclosure investing from the inside out. You'll learn how to finance your deals using other people's money. You'll learn how to overcome your fear of getting started. End quote. The ad featured a guarantee attributed to the man himself. I can turn anyone into a successful real estate investor, including you. So, why not me? Donald Trump was a name I trusted. I grew up in Philadelphia, less than 100 miles from Trump's home base, New York City, so I was familiar with his success as a real estate developer and as an author of the 1987 bestseller, The Art of the Deal. I'd made the hour-long drive to Atlantic City, New Jersey a couple times, and his last name was splashed across the casinos, T-R-U-M-P, and flashing lights. I consider the name Trump synonymous with success and wealth. At least that's what it meant for me back then. During the mid-'80s, while a student at Drexel University, I was one of the co-founding members of the D-Users, widely acknowledged as the first Macintosh users group. I was invited to a Hollywood-style event called Going National, hosted by Drexel on its campus. There, I met the legendary Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple. His inspiring talk that day imagined future computers using artificial intelligence to have conversations with the dead. Not literally, but using inputs known about, for example, Abraham Lincoln. The AI would bring Lincoln to life so you could have a modern-day conversation with him as if he were alive today. Jobs' talk inspired me to lead a team tasked during a competition with imagining the personal computer of the year 2000. There we were, to present our vision with an impressive panel. Science fiction writer Ray Bradbury, futurist Alvin Toffler, education writer and historian Diane Ravitch, computer pioneer Alan Kay, and Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak. A team from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign won the competition. They envisioned a tablet device that sounded an awful lot like the eventual iPad. During a luncheon, I got to sit at a table with Bradbury, and we began talking. He was amiable. He told me how his writing career didn't take off right away. He kept at it, day by day, year by year, and eventually success and fame found him. I love science fiction, and Fahrenheit 451 is one of my favorite books. Besides my father, Bradbury probably inspired me more than anyone else as a writer, something I enjoy doing in my spare time. The Project 2000 contest was beneficial in another way. It allowed me to connect with Apple employees and give them my resume. By 1989, I was moving to California as an Apple employee. I worked as an engineer at Apple until the mid-'90s, during the time before Steve Jobs returned to the company. I left to join a company called General Magic, where I worked on product and project management. During my time there, I bumped into a French-born computer programmer who said his wife came up with an idea about selling stuff from around the house online. Everybody laughed about it. I guess Pierre Obeidallah got the last laugh. His creation, Auction Web, was later renamed eBay and became one of the world's leading e-commerce companies. I bounced around several tech companies in Silicon Valley, including Oracle, and Philips Semiconductors. At one point, I tried my hand at law school, taking classes at night. Philips was picking up the tab. Classes were challenging and my head wasn't in it. It was a big commitment, and I ended up only going for a year. My passion remained with high tech. After moving to California, I didn't keep close tabs on Donald Trump. I wasn't aware of his casino empire cratering or his massive, massive debt. Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio and tag you're it. So have you noticed that the Republicans are pretty much not talking about a constitutional convention anymore? They used to be gung-ho to rewrite the Constitution. You know, they wanted to put corporate personhood in there. They wanted to change it so that women can't vote. They wanted to do away with the election of senators, repeal the 17th Amendment, take us back to them being appointed by the states. They had all these weird, they wanted to outlaw labor unions, all these weird ideas, but they've stopped talking about it. I mean, they're still moving forward on it, but it's not. Project 2025, for example, you know, their ultimate talking document does not have one single mention in it about a constitutional convention. Why would that be? Well, it's because the Supreme Court is doing their work for them. I mean, you know, just they have overturned Article 2. They've overturned the 1st, 4th, 9th, and 14th Amendments. They've overturned Article 1, Section 7. All the details of this whole thing are over at HartmannReport.com. You got to check it out.
The king walks tall, crown shining bright. No one dares to stand and fight. The light turns green, he moves ahead, while the ones who swore to stop him turn and bow instead. Is tyranny getting a green light? Are we just watching as the dark takes the night? When silence is louder than a battle cry, tell me, are we letting freedom die?
36 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Joe in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind today?
Not much, Tom. Thanks for having me on. You know, when I listen to your callers that are so on top of the issues and stuff, I did want to hit just real quickly a couple of things. We keep saying that Republicans are afraid of being primary. They're afraid of their own voters.
That's true.
I mean, how sick is that? And back on your list of things that Democrats need to do going forward, and it's already kind of happening a little bit. I like that they're talking about what Musk is doing in more of a worst-case scenario, because it could be far darker than anyone's even talking about, crashing the global economy, holding it hostage. But this is the one that I want you to get on that list, is to start calling out the Republican religious hypocrisy. And I wanted to bring attention to a story that you may not have seen of freshman Representative Dave Min of California. He posted on X to Trump's press secretary, "Thou shalt not bear false witness. Carolyn Levitt is a fake Christian, like so many in the Golden Cap administration. She's comfortable stating a bold-faced lie to hundreds of millions of people while wearing a giant cross to let everyone know how pious and moral she is." Boom. Yeah. I mean, that is, because here's the deal. There's three segments that vote Republican. The 30% that are totally crazy, love, burn it all down, want to see the pain. You've got the billionaires who want the cash. And then you've got this big swath and some crossover of this religious thing where starving a baby infant's okay as long as you stop abortion and or stop gay people. So we have to when this guy did this is what is missing. If they, not to be the preachers, but to call out the fact that the Republicans put their hand on a Bible to faithfully conduct their duties in office. None of them are doing it. They're all.
Trump got around that by refusing to put his hand on the Bible, but when he was sworn in. But I get what you're saying, and I would add, you know, the racists to your, you know, Republican coalition. But I totally get it, and I think that anybody who has any familiarity with and a real embrace of Christianity should and can be speaking out right now in a religious context against these people, because what they're doing is spitting in the face of Jesus, basically. These people who claim to be Christians. I mean, all you have to do is read the Sermon on the Mount, read what he said about being pious, about public prayer, about caring for children, or read Matthew 25, 40, whatever it is, 43 or 45. Matthew 25, anyway, the parable of the goats and the sheep.
There's a ton of them. I called men's off him, and guess what? After he posted that, the maggots went into a full-on rage. The last thing they want is anyone to call out the absolute falsehoods of them in kind of like calling. I think they should refer to Trump as a deceiver. You got to speak in those languages, but instead of actually talking about what he was stating that was not true, what the press secretary was saying, they started bringing up a recent DUI arrest. If that's that whataboutism they do. Sure. Well, you got a DUI, right? So that was how they had no problem with Pete Hegseth's laundry list of public intoxication events. The hypocrisy is so deep. That's what has to be called out. Yeah. They need to speak in terms that people in that religious group understand. Is a devil. He's a deceiver. He's a deceiver in chief. Yeah. So, I mean, we have to talk about it because that is a truism in all this, too, is these are not religious people. Yeah. These people work for the greed.
I agree. I sometimes wonder, about the Antichrist even. Yeah, I appreciate it. Michael in Gainesville, Florida. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Yeah, hi. I'm sad to say it, but I can picture at a national prayer breakfast in the future an announcement that we're changing e pluribus unum, out of many one, to something else because it seemed DEI, and it is DEI. I mean, it came out
they've been working on that for years. I mean, that goes back to the In God We Trust that went on the coins in the 1950s as a result of McCarthy's campaigns.
And then resulted, and there's a series here, I'm glad you pointed that out. And then we ended up with the Civil Rights of 1965, and there hasn't been a response in our coinage yet. And I think it could be out of God, one Christ, which would be ex Deo unis Christus. And I think that my point isn't to promote that. My point is to propose that be a signal for a student strike. And I would say teacher, of course, that's outlawed. And the reason that it's outlawed is because should students strike, there's no other group in existence where the wheels of commerce shut down to the same extent as when students strike. That's why teachers are banned from doing it. And the other problem with students is it spreads, and they're not rational. They'll get excited, and they'll act on, that story you told is so wonderful. Kids have an innate sense of fairness, and they'll reach a boiling point. Like when they're playing a game, you told the story of instead of one winning over the other, they stopped playing when both had an equal score.
Yeah, that was in Australia. I saw that. Yeah.
And we'll see a student strike, and I think the signal for that strike should be when it is proposed that our currency be changed to whatever it is, whether it's ex Deo unis Christus or something else. But when they say that no, e pluribus unum is DEI, we need to change it. That would, I think, because like the lady said earlier, when reeling in a monster, timing is, I'm going to add this, timing is everything.
Yeah.
And that would be the timing so everyone knows.
I get it. Michael, thank you. That's a good one. Steve in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Good afternoon here. A couple serious thoughts. But I just want you to know I had a direct pipeline to a political groundhog, and that was, a week ago or so. And he comes out every 4 years, the election. And he came up and saw a shadow, and what that means is 4 years of stormy political weather.
Yeah.
And I think he's spot on. So, you understand what I'm saying there.
I do.
Getting back to seriousness here, I'm concerned about the vaccines and stuff like that, with Kennedy becoming the head honcho there.
Did you see that there's a measles outbreak going on in Texas in a very conservative town among right-wingers who didn't vaccinate their kids, and something like 3/4 of all these kids who got measles are now in the hospital?
I'm not surprised. I heard polio's making a comeback.
Yep.
Other things, I'm worried about the next pandemic that's coming down the pike.
Yep.
It's very serious. One question I have for you, make it fast here because I know we're at the end of the hour. seems like South Korea, didn't they have a similar political crisis that unfolded when they had a rogue administration and president? How did they handle this?
There were some significant differences between South Korea and the United States. Yes, they had a president, President Yoon, who declared a state of emergency and tried to basically shut down Parliament and lock out his political opposition. The problem that he had was, number one, his party did not control Parliament, which is different from the situation we have here. So Parliament rose up and said, no, you can't do that. We're going to impeach you. They successfully impeached him. Also, his own administration prosecuted him. He's been in jail for the last couple of weeks. He's in solitary confinement right now. And he's being prosecuted for sedition now. And the other thing that was different from between us and South Korea is that in South Korea, the right-wing media is very, very marginalized. There is right-wing media. Most of it is run by this, by the remnants of the Reverend Moon's empire. And his son, who wears a crown of bullets and praise to AR-15s. But the most of the press in South Korea is still independent and loves democracy. And so the press, president, and the parliament, the legislature turned against the president, and he couldn't withstand. And so at that point, his own military refused to follow his orders and arrested him and put him in jail. I don't see the same thing happening here. Trump controls our military. He controls our police systems with an absolute iron fist now. The Republicans in the House and Senate are completely cowed. Our media is scared to death. All three of the big networks, most of our major newspapers have been sued by Trump. They're looking at, CBS is looking at a $10 billion lawsuit from Trump. They're terrified, and they're trying to shut down our kind of last national independent media, which is National Public Radio. And I think there's a very good chance that they will do that in the next year or so. So, yes, there are parallels, but not, or there's analogies, but not absolute parallels. Steve, thanks for the call. It's 46 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in 60 seconds. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
Excuse me, not 60 seconds. I'll be back with you in a couple minutes. Stay with us, though. Stay tuned. And welcome back. Mike in Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
If Trump has this 25% tax on Canada and Mexico, it's going to wreck the hospitality industry in America. And the reason why is because some of the best-selling brands we get, like Crown Royal, Canadian Mist, Windsor Canadian, Canadian Club, Black Velvet Canadian, Seagram's Canadian Hunter, over 50 types of Canadian whiskeys are all going to go up $5 to $10 a bottle. In Mexico, all their tequilas are going to go up $5 to $18 a bottle. In the United States, we have over 40,000 bars and restaurants. We have over 45,000 restaurants. The alcohol beverage industry in the United States is $260 billion. So you're looking at, in Wisconsin, where I live alone, there's 2,732 taverns and restaurants, mostly of which are owned by mom and pop people. So when you're looking at all these tax increases and all these Canadian whiskeys coming down from Canada, plus all these tequilas like Patron, Jose Cuervo, Mezcal tequilas from Mexico, those are going to go up even higher, $10, $15, $20 a bottle. It's going to kill the restaurant business. So you're going to have your tariff tax of 25%, then you're going to have your distributor increase, and then you're going to have your business retail increase to the consumer. So it's all going to ripple down. It's going to really, really hurt the American hospitality business bad. We get over $10 billion a year imported wines from 70 countries. All that'll be taxed at 10%, whatever Trump's tariffs are in line. So it's all going to wreak havoc on the hospitality industry. Restaurants, mom-pop bars, liquor stores in this country.
I get it, Mike.
In Canada, all the liquor.
I get it. I totally get it.
Okay.
And I think you're absolutely right. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And he's also just announced a tariff on steel and aluminum, which actually I think you could argue might be productive. But Mike, thank you. Thanks for highlighting that so that people can understand it in a way that people can understand it. Alina in Redmond, Washington. Hey, Alina, what's up?
Yes, hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Calling for, we have two local elections tomorrow. One is in Seattle, very important initiatives. Two for school funding, which probably will pass. But one is for housing. It's basically based on the European model, social housing. It's initiative 1A. The bad one is 1B. So 1A would actually raise some revenue by taxing the largest businesses a tiny bit. But of course, if you know anything about Seattle politics, we've got conservative mayor and conservative city council. They push it for 1B. And big businesses also push it for 1B. So Amazon donated $100,000 and Microsoft donated $100,000. They don't want to be paying this tiny tax to house.
Yeah. Well, these days, whoever has the most money typically wins the elections. You know, since the Supreme Court, did away with our election laws, basically.
Yeah, but I just want people to vote for 1A. There's a disinformation campaign, so 1B won't raise any revenue.
Yeah. So vote for 1A. Is that what you're saying?
1A, yes. Yeah. Vote yes on 1A.
You got it. Alina, thank you so much for the PSA here, the public service announcement. It is 10 minutes before the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Human beings have a couple of unique characteristics. The first is that we can be very tender and loving and concerned and caring toward people we perceive as being our group, us. We can also be extraordinarily violent against people that we consider to be them if we think of them or this other as a threat. Probably the classic example of this is Adolf Hitler convincing Germans that, Jews were a threat to them and good Germans going along with the Holocaust. Well, this othering is built into our DNA. This is, ancient stuff. And the Republican Party, since the time of Nixon, when he started, picking up the white racist vote after Democrats laid it down in the 60s, the Republicans have been using this to try to other minorities in America as a political strategy. And this is really deadly stuff. There's a whole op-ed about it over at HartmannReport.com. Is othering human nature's deadliest instinct? Check it out.
First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me. No one left to speak for me. If we stay silent, the darkness will spread, turning neighbor to foe, filling hearts with dread. It's our time to rise, it's our time to fight for justice, for freedom, to stand in the light.
53 minutes past the hour, picking up your calls here. Mike in Fort Collins, Colorado. Hey, Mike, thanks for listening to KTRC. What's up?
I wanted to talk about this deportation thing in the context of Aurora, Colorado. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever mentioned this before, but Aurora, Colorado is a maggot city.
A what?
Majority of the city
is a what?
A maggot.
Oh, MAGA. Okay, yeah.
Maggot. I can't even, MAGA, if we want to say MAGA, that's fine.
No, I get it. I got it. It's fine.
Okay. The majority of the city council and the mayor, who's a former Republican congressman who was defeated in re-election by Jason Crow because he didn't have the guts to stand up and take the hard questions from his constituents. Now, they could have taken care of this gang from Venezuela a long time ago. They do not control the city. They got into some rundown apartment buildings run by an international or a national management company. That just all of their properties in the Denver area are they're slums basically. And what surprises me is the Aurora Police Department. Their modus operandi is let's go in shooting and then we'll figure things out later. They've cost Aurora a lot of money. They killed a kid by the name of Elijah McLean here, I think about 6 years ago, and basically got away with it. You know, the one cop got 14 months in jail. The two.
So, Mike, what's the point you're trying to make here?
Well, the point that I'm trying to make is that Trump has made this his let's say the hood ornament on the Cadillac. Okay.
No, I get it.
And falsely said, well, they've taken over the entire city. These are people that live in these apartment buildings. All they want to do, they want to go to the restaurant. They want to, wash dishes, come home and take care of their families.
So they're not gang members?
What? They're not gang members. No, they're
just Venezuelan refugees.
Right. Exactly. I don't care. I could give a care. Get rid of the Venezuelan gang. If they're MS-13, get rid of them.
Sure.
But
he says that's the only people he's taking to Gitmo. We'll see. I'm very skeptical. Mike, thanks for the call. And apparently there's no due process involved in taking them to Gitmo, at least according to what our DHS secretary said on the Sunday shows. Thanks so much for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active, tag your it. We need you more than ever. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the folks around you. Stay safe, and I'll catch up with you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.